It's time for Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott's here. Richard Campbell is here. Some sad news in Redmond, some big layoffs ahead for Microsoft. We'll also talk about AI, Microsoft's investment in OpenAI.org, and what it's going to mean for Windows. And 12 years after Windows 8 and Surface, Apple might be adding touchscreens to the Mac. Paul Thurrott asks, why? It's all coming up next on Windows Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell, episode 812, recorded Wednesday, January 18th, 2023. Pessimism Pays. Windows Weekly is brought to you by Lenovo, orchestrated by the experts at CDW to help transform your organization with Lenovo ThinkPads, equipped with the Intel Evo platform for effortless connectivity and collaboration from anywhere. Learn more at cdw.com/Lenovo Client. And by Tanium. Tanium unites operations and security teams with a single platform that identifies where all your IT data is, patches every device you own in seconds, and implements critical security controls, all from a single pane of glass. Are you ready to protect your organization from cyber threats? Learn more at tanium.com/twit. Thanks for listening to this show. As an ad-supported network, we are always looking for new partners with products and services that will benefit our qualified audience. Are you ready to grow your business? Reach out to advertise@twit.tv and launch your campaign now. It's time for Windows Weekly. Get ready, winners and dozers. Time to talk about Microsoft with these handsome fellas right here.
Thank you for that pause.
I was thinking of an appropriate description.
Whatever they are.
These lovely gentlemen on your
Alleged
left.
humans.
Paul Thurrott, Thurrott.com, leanpub.com, longtime host of the show, 800
First-time caller.
12 episodes. On your right, our newest member of the team, the wonderful Richard Campbell from Runners Radio and .NET Rocks from beautiful Coquitlam in British Columbia.
Well,
good to be here. I appreciate
like a
the
Mexican
search for the superlative.
Coquitlam.
Coquitlam.
From the ancient
Well, it is
Teotihuacan.
Indian, right? That's an Indian.
Yeah, it's
That's
from the
gotta be.
Quaquitlam band, where Quaquitlam literally translated means stinky mud.
Stinky Mud.
Well,
From
that's good
Stinky
to-
Mud, BC.
There you
I
go.
can see why you kept it in the original.
Petaluma means the back of the mountain, I think.
Yeah.
Did we talk about this last week? I think we did. The idea that place names last a
The
lot
mountain's
longer.
Patoot.
And it was part of the valuable information that helped them decode the Rosetta Stone was that place names rarely change.
Yeah, I should make a run by the British Museum, see all the stuff they stole. Next week.
Well, you can. So some of it's going back.
Can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those Elgin marbles.
I think the Egyptians have requested the Rosetta Stone back, and
That's right.
Oh,
I don't know. Oh, that's
interesting.
interesting.
Oh,
There is the next big thing is going to be that the marble,
the Elgin marbles,
like front piece from the
yeah.
From the
It's really.
the
We
Parthenon.
went to the Athens has a beautiful museum now.
Yeah,
And we went there, and they
actually have a place for it.
Yeah, they literally do. They have
that's
the
beautiful.
because it's
Yeah.
the pediment on top of the Parthenon,
Mhm.
and they have a few, and then they have an
Yeah.
outline for the ones the Brits have.
That's great.
And it's like
it's a good move.
We want these back. We want
Yeah.
these back.
Well, the argument used to be the Greeks can't take care of this stuff, and since then they've
Not true.
Like you said, built this beautiful
Yeah, it's
museum
not true.
and have
Yeah,
these
yeah.
wonderful facilities.
Although we can thank the various invaders and marauders
As we should.
for preserving some of it. Although the Acropolis was shelled, bombarded. Was it Napoleon? Somebody bombarded it and destroyed it. And but way back in the 19th century or
Well,
something.
the Germans put ammunition in the Parthenon during World War II.
Oh, maybe
so
it was
wouldn't
maybe it
get-
was in World War II. Yeah.
Yeah, so it wouldn't get destroyed, right?
Right.
It's a clever trick.
And that's your history lesson for the week.
That's right.
Thanks for joining
Here's
us.
some random facts we know about history.
We know some things. Yes, we do.
70% of it's probably true.
Yeah.
I guarantee a close on the history of brown liquor by the end of the day.
Oh, that will be fun.
Be prepared.
That will be fun. What do aficionados call it? Because there's whiskey, there's bourbon, there's Irish whiskey, there's Canadian whiskey.
Yeah, I think whiskey's sort of the generic term.
Whiskey's
and if it's in North America, then it has an E, and if it isn't in North America, it doesn't.
We had a little debate because I think we used the word whiskey in one of our titles, and I was asked, are you going to use an E or not? And I said, I don't think so. I think I'll not use an E.
But if you're talking Scottish, then yeah, leave off the E. But
you're going with the continental spelling.
Bourbon's
you must
E.
be a Yale man.
Oh my God, a Yale man.
Yeah, E's are for the colonies.
Yes.
Yeah.
E's are for the colonies. Oh, that's easy to remember. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Let us talk about Windows because there's a big story that broke this morning.
Yeah.
Big layoffs coming to Microsoft.
Yep. As rumored, 24 hours ago by an incredible, like first it was Bloomberg, then it was everybody, I should not that. I don't know why I'm laughing. So unfortunately, Microsoft is going to lay off 10,000 people between now and the end of March, which is the end of their fiscal third quarter. They're going to take a $1.2 billion charge related to this, kind of belated in a sense, because this is happening all across big tech, right? See if I can rattle off some of the company names. It's, Meta,
Amazon,
Salesforce, a bunch of companies are doing this. Amazon. Mm-hmm. The thing that is most striking about this, well, actually, I say there's two things. One thing is that they specified engineering, which is kind of interesting. And Microsoft has 221,000 employees right now.
They're huge.
That's insane.
So this is only 5%.
And they also hired 40,000 last year alone.
Exactly, right? Which was itself number. A 22% increase over the prior year.
Some of this is just, in other words, laying off the extra staff hired during pandemic.
Right. And then I guess to put this in perspective, one of the bad things that happened right when Satya Nadella took over is they basically laid off almost everyone involved with Windows Phone from Nokia. And that was 18,000 people, right, back in 2014.
Including letting go of Stephen Elop, by all accounts, it was, from the head down.
Wow.
It was like, hey, welcome to Microsoft. If you'll continue through the room, you can get your exit package. And thanks for coming.
But laying off Elop was also a little bit like, screw you, Nokia, right? Like, this was a bad idea. We're sorry we did it, and we're going to get rid of all.
Yeah.
It's erasing the remnants of the ugly history.
That's right.
Because Nadella did not want to buy Nokia, right?
That's exactly right, yeah.
But also, I think Elop was very much a bomberite and an aggressive personality. So
I didn't know that. Oh.
Well, he wanted to be CEO, and he was seen as a lot of people unfairly, I think, but saw him as sort of a Trojan horse. Like he had gone to Nokia specifically because this was going to happen at some point. The truth is, Stephen Elop wanted to run a company, and whatever. We can debate what he did at Nokia. I think he did the best with a bad hand.
They were in a tough situation. No choice about it. I've read the books. Building an operating system for a phone, especially for other third parties to develop against. Very hard problem. It's difficult to do well.
That's right.
Ask the BlackBerry folks. They had a tough time too. I did some custom development on BlackBerry. And we remember one point we had to do custom builds per version of the ROMs.
Yeah.
That's how unabstracted it was. And Nokia had similar problems with their stuff.
That's right.
Why did it matter what ROM version?
Just the way that the OS started up.
Incompatible APIs?
Yeah, that kind of thing. The way they loaded things into memory, it just means if you weren't running the exact version, it wouldn't run
That's
correctly.
No fun for a developer.
Nope.
To have to query
develop on the stack.
What ROM version and all that. That's really
well. This was the issue with Windows Mobile before Windows Phone, right? Not the ROM version necessarily, but just the number of different configurations made developing for that platform very difficult.
I guess that happens
because
in
OEMs
Android
were less. They were free to do whatever they wanted.
You got to know which version of Android you're running on, and Windows too. So I guess it's not so weird, but
Yeah,
I do remember the early version.
You want more compatibility, right?
Like the most would be best. Yes.
And most of the time, just to recompile is enough. I mean, we certainly run into this issue with iPhone native apps where every time there's a new OS release, minimum you have to recompile and redeploy.
Right. There's always new APIs, new features, and old ones deprecated and so forth. I do remember the early days of Windows Phone. It didn't handle SD cards well at all.
Actually at all. Didn't have copy and paste.
Yeah.
But the first version was rushed to market, which makes sense. I mean, honestly. But anyway, whatever. Windows Phone is ancient history. But I've not heard from anyone that I know yet from Microsoft about these layoffs. I'm curious if I will. If I do, it's usually bad news.
I mean, there were certainly hints. There was also a lot of push when I was talking to folks, a few weeks ago. They were saying, "Hey, we're minimizing expenses things so that we don't have to have layoffs." They keep their travel budget very tight, that kind of thing. But clearly, that it wasn't enough.
That's actually right. That's part of the story, right? They went into this kind of late because they were trying to avoid it.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's a small number. It's a 25% of what they hired last year. So for the most part, I did talk to a friend of mine who has been caught in the layoffs, and he'd only been enrolled for about a year and a half. And they're pretty generous. So he's working through to the end of the week, and then he'll have till the end of March to find a new role.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Reaching out to him.
That's really the way to do it, which is
and I think this is humane. What we're actually seeing here. Yeah. Not only just a generous severance, but also this is a cheaper and a simpler way to do a reorg.
Yeah.
They need to change some realignment, so they lay off areas that need realigning, and then those folks who want to stay in and find new roles, and work continues. And those that don't go on to other things, but are fairly generously compensated.
They're actually very generous, right? So they're going to continue healthcare coverage for 6 months. They're going to continue vesting of stock awards for 6 months. They're going to offer career transfer services, 60 days notice prior to termination, et cetera, in the U.S., I should say. It's, they're trying to do this with, well, as he said, not Satya Nadella, I believe, used the term dignity and respect, right?
Mm-hmm. Bravo.
As, by the way, he flies back from Davos on his private jet and probably makes about $1.5 billion a year. But for sure.
Well, and do you think they overhired in pandemic? I mean, this is really absolutely all of these companies are doing this.
There was also a period where you couldn't hire anybody at Microsoft too, right? Because the other tech giants had bumped up all the wages a bunch. So there was like a window there where they were running cold and resisting raising wages. And then the dam broke, when it stopped, and suddenly they had a huge block of hiring happen all at once. To the point where, again, folks that I talked to were like, oh, hey, it's a big company, and you're like, we haven't been able to hire anybody for a couple of months, and suddenly it all came through, and it was thousands of people, and like the onboarding process was overwhelmed, and it was too many people. Like they'd overfilled the role, so there was a shakeup there as well. So I think there was some anxiety around hiring, that they grabbed what they could because it felt like there was a rush going on, and now that's subsided.
Which is bad news for the people getting laid off.
Well, this is the story to Amazon, and probably all the rest of big tech as well. There was a big hiring boom during the pandemic. I think before Rich had joined, I think we had this conversation where it kind of bothered me how unsophisticated it was. These companies thought that, or didn't understand this was temporary. That Amy Hood had come out at one point and said, "Wow, we kind of forgot how important Windows was. We're going to start investing in that.
Oh
again."
my God!
Are you kidding?
What's Windows? Holy cow!
Windows. People use Windows. I mean, who knew? Well, I feel like you should know. C-level executive at Microsoft. I thought that was kind of clueless. And then, of course, on the flip side, you get the flip side, which is now we have too many employees, we have too many costs. We need to tighten our belts. So, it's a classic story told many times. But.
I would also say that the numbers are low enough here relative to the number of employees. Like there's a normal 2 or 3% turnover. Like that's kind of normal in a company this size. And
anyway,
5%. Like part of me wonders if this is just an announcement because they have to say, yeah, we're doing it too.
This is a good segue for me to bring in the notion of personality. So last week, Richard and I chatted before the show, and I asked him how he was doing. And Richard said, I have nothing to complain about. And I said, those words have never crossed my mind or my lips. I always have something to complain about. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I worry that this is not the only round of layoffs, right? That, that may, 3 months ago will go by and they'll say, we did what we did before. We tried to do the best we could and we're still a little top heavy. That's kind of where I come from. That's the thing I'm worried about. I agree with you. This is 10,000 people is a lot of people. It's also a very small number in the context of their overall employee ranks. So,
and their 180 billion a year income, like it's not like they're struggling to pay the rent.
Well, they're looking to spend $70 billion almost on Activision Blizzard. They have spent they have spent somewhere around $3 billion so far in OpenAI and are looking to spend another 10. But you guys, sorry, I turned the pandemic. No, sorry, you got to go. Whatever you're doing, that's over.
It's not like they're Twitter selling off the furniture.
No. The leadership at Microsoft is considerably better than that at Twitter. I think that's
not saying much. That's a very low bar.
That being said, I do plan to bid on a couple of pieces.
I think it's too late. It's over. It was over an hour and 20 minutes ago.
Oh, is it good?
It was over. It was just a 24-hour auction.
I think the leadership at the local Hardee's is better than that at Twitter right now. But that's too bad.
Yeah, I would. There's some things I all of the objects were like $5 to start before they got any bidding.
Sure,
right
before they were
so
$10,000 or whatever.
Yeah, but they ended up being fairly. I think some deals. I mean, do you need 20 whiteboards? Because I can get.
Well, hopefully, if this happens to Microsoft, so we could buy like the source code of Visual Basic 3 or something, and open source it and bring it back.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? But some of the things like the bird statue went for like $15,000.
Wow.
Sure. Some of the stuff went for a lot of money.
There's a few of these that are over in just a few more minutes. The auctions will end.
I thought it all ended at 10 a.m. Pacific. Okay. Okay. Right. Well, that's a relief. Quickly, do you want to get in there and?
Well, there's a couple of big mixers here that are very exciting.
I know there was the whole kitchen. Like Elon said, we're not going to give you food.
Will this save Twitter? Is that what's happening?
Well,
is
it's
that
funny.
What this takes?
Everything.
The spokesman.
You're having a yard sale.
The spokesman from the Auction House Global Heritage Partners said, anybody who thinks that this is going to help a $44 billion bottom line.
It's like having a bake sale at a church.
He said, "He's a moron."
We raised $110. It was amazing.
You're a moron. Which I thought was kind of impolitic for a marketing guy, but whatever. Let's see. Let me see what we can get still. Oops, that's the wrong.
Oh, they still got a few screens for sale. You got like a minute or an hour left to bid on these.
Oh, good. Twitter online auction sale featuring surplus corporate offered assets of Twitter.
This definitely looks like a building's worth of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Oh, I have to register to bid? Oh, forget about it. Forget about it.
You can't just use ibid.com.
It should just be, Apple Pay, man. Apple Pay.
Well, somebody's bid $6,000 on a chair.
4 minutes left to get a Blodgett BCX 14G double full-size combi oven.
Double full-size combi oven.
$29,000. But this is a deal. The steam-jacketed tilting kettle currently only $3,900. How many steam-jacketed tilting kettles do you need?
I think one. Pretty sure.
Yeah.
Or zero.
One will do. Well, if you're making a lot of soup, I guess. I don't know what it is.
If you're making a lot of soup.
So the kitchen stuff
that
is the
was
last
the rationalization.
Yeah. The kitchen stuff is the last to go. But I bet you there's some people got some deals here.
Yeah, there's still pages and pages.
Here's a 20-gallon vegetable dryer for just $850.
Yeah.
Did you know Electrolux, besides making vacuums, makes vegetable dryers?
I did not. Is it an attachment for a vacuum cleaner? That'd be kind of interesting. Dry your vegetables while you clean your home.
You ever want to make your own heroes at home? Here's a Gas Hero broiler. 2200.
Is that like a spit for a?
Yeah, you've seen those in the windows, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Making your Euros.
Oh God, that is labor intensive.
I think all the office stuff is.
You'd be better off just buying one at a store.
Here's an Epiphan Video Pearl 2 live production system. Bunch of projectors. It's a good auction. I hope it saves Twitter. That's all I can say.
It's going to fix everything.
A lot of polycoms.
We were able to bring on one more moderator. Everything's fine for one.
Some people are stupid and overbidding. The 27-inch iMac for $1,300.
Yeah.
Well, it has the Twitter sticker.
Oh, it
on
has
it,
a
Leo.
Twitter
Come on,
sticker.
come on.
That makes it valuable.
Yep.
Half an hour left. Oh, wow. I thought I'd missed out. The complete multifunction entertainment system, audio and video. Wow,
the people buying this stuff are the same people paying Twitter now to get a little blue logo on their stupid profile or whatever.
Oh my God, this is a mess.
Well, if I can get a tilting kettle for $8, I'm excited.
$8, yes. Oh God, no wonder Twitter's fail whale. Look at the wiring on this thing. Come on, man. That's pathetic. Their AV squad was subpar, clearly. Big TV, $600. Yeah. Okay.
All right, I think it's time for the gong. Where's Mary Jo?
Enough? You've had enough? No more Twitter? No more Twitter crap? Get a bunch of Google Jam boards.
Target.
All right. I'm just telling you, you're missing out. All right, what's next in the agenda? Actually, I'll tell you what's next in the agenda. I'm going to do an ad so that Richard can quickly jump on that tilting steam kettle.
Thanks,
Okay.
Leader.
Oh, man.
This episode of Windows Weekly brought to you by, Lenovo, orchestrated by the experts at CDW. The helpful people at CDW understand as the world changes, your organization needs to adapt quickly to be successful. You don't need any more tilting steaming kettles. You need some Lenovo from CDW. CDW can keep your business ahead of the curve with Lenovo ThinkPads like this baby I got right here. These powerful devices deliver the business class performance you're looking for thanks to Windows 10 and the Intel Evo platform. With your remote teams working across the country and around the world, collaboration isn't a problem because Lenovo ThinkPads keep your organization productive and connected from anywhere. Plus, CDW knows your workforce has different work styles, needs flexibility. That's why Lenovo ThinkPads are equipped with responsive tools and built-in features that let your team work seamlessly across their favorite tools. Think about that for a second. Let's not forget about security, of course. These high-performing machines protect at the highest level with built-in hardware to guard against modern threats without slowing your team down. When you need to get more out of your technology, Lenovo makes seamless productivity possible. CDW makes it powerful. Learn more at cdw.com/Lenovo client. Thank you, CDW, for supporting Windows Weekly. cdw.com/Lenovo client. Actually kind of intrigued by, they showed it at CES, the Lenovo phone that goes with the Lenovo laptops and does that seamless connectivity thing that Samsung and Windows do. Should I buy one of those? It looks like a pretty nice phone. Are they going to send you one, Paul? The Think phone.
I am going to look in. Yeah, I'm going to see if I get a lot of Lenovo stuff for review, so I'd love to take a look at that. Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, but I replaced that Dell with my nice ThinkPad. Because the Dell,
I did not know. That's
I was having
you talked about that. Yeah.
This is
the old
X1 Extreme, which
that's right.
It may be old. It's like a 8th gen.
It's got like an 8 series processor. It's nice.
8th gen i7, but it's a nice. I forgot how much I like Lenovo's.
The Think phone is made by Motorola.
Yeah,
right?
that's the whole,
which is owned by
Lenovo. So it's like it makes sense. Yeah.
It's weird they haven't done that before.
Well, maybe it's just taking that long to line the teams up, right?
Yeah.
To get to that point where they're collaborating.
Initially, and this was my concern when Google sold Motorola to Lenovo, was that they wouldn't, because I loved those old Motorola phones.
I remember the ones you could customize and have like a wood back or a bamboo back, and they had all that stuff. It was really nice.
You could also customize. It's the only phone I've ever had the wake word, so you didn't have to say, "Hey, Goog."
Right.
I had mine say, I said, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
If you say, hey, Goog, Steve Guggenheimer pops up on the bottom of your screen.
That's what you don't want. So
like Clippy, only different.
Yeah. What was it? The Motorola, was it called the X? I remember going to Google.
I had a Motorola X for sure. I think that was the one with the you could customize the back and the materials.
They had a whole Motorola customization website where you could do all.
Beautiful.
And then Lenovo bought them, and for a long time they did keep it kind of like traditional. The Moto Gs were very much like the old Moto Xs. But I think it's time maybe that they, and this looks a lot like a ThinkPad. It has that same design.
Yeah, look and feels beautiful.
Yeah.
And you have to think if Windows Phone had succeeded somehow, there would have been a ThinkPad phone based on Windows Phone.
Don't get me started.
I do think that Lenovo dual screen PCs laptop's kind of fun.
Really?
I think that's fun. Right?
It's fun. It's interesting.
Yeah.
They're trying to do something different.
Everyone is. I mean, that one's really out there. But Richard is a guy, if you don't mind me saying, who travels with an external display, right? So
I do.
He uses his laptop with an external display. I find that very.
You have like a 14-inch or bigger?
Yeah, a 15. It's a 4K as well, which is really nice. It's a great screen to look at.
Yeah, but I have one of those kind of like, it's USB. It's not a fancy. It's just portable.
USB-C, of course. Yeah, for a laptop.
You carry it around.
Yep. For a while there, I carried two, but it made people angry.
I'm
a lot of room.
I'm angry just hearing about it.
You're like, hey, you're not in an airline cockpit, buddy.
Would you in the plane? Would you set the two up?
No, in the speaker's lounge, right? But even that would make
plane. I mean, exactly. You're in a room with other.
What are you, day trading?
And they're all they're like, dude, I'm on a laptop. What are you doing?
The corrective amount of screen space is more.
I agree.
Yep.
Although it does bring to mind the word nerd.
Of course.
Let's talk about. Did you talked about Amazon's 18,000 layoffs, right? In this context.
Just because it's also
everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it.
Everybody's doing it.
Everybody's doing it.
Right.
Let's talk AI. We talked last week about the rumor that Microsoft was going to put another $10 billion into Open AI.
Yeah, so Satya Nadella destroyed the ecosystem and flew in his private jet to Davos, and then he admitted that Microsoft was doing all those things we speculated about last week. But it was really interesting to hear him kind of spell it out, because it's kind of like a 3-point kind of a thing, right, or a strategy, right? So obviously, Azure is the place to go for AI. They announced some services there. They want to make the foundational models that resulted in ChatGPT into platforms that anyone can build on top of. And they announced specifically they will make APIs for ChatGPT. And then, of course, they're going to integrate AI across the stack. And this is the thing that, to me, is the most meaningful thing in the world. And it speaks to this frustration I've had with Microsoft over the past at least 10 years, which is that as the focus at the company has turned to the cloud, because that's what got them to the market cap they're at now, that's what reinvigorated their stock price after literally 15 years of it flatlining at $35. That's all they pay attention to. So every quarter they announce all their earnings. They don't want to talk about legacy. They don't talk about Office. They talk about Office a little bit. They don't talk about Windows. They don't talk about Xbox. And what I mean by that is, of course, they talk about those things, but there's no numbers. There's no hard numbers. It's all cloud. They invent this non-existent business that used to be commercial cloud. I forget the new name for that, but it's sort of this aggregation of things from across Microsoft that's all cloud related. And they can say, look at this. It's bigger than AWS. We're huge. We're big. We're cloud, And that kind of overemphasis on the cloud took away an emphasis that used to exist for the part of the company that I care about, which is the client, primarily Windows, but also all the things that kind of surround Windows in that ecosystem. And the thing that's exciting about AI to me is that it infuses across the stack. It's client and server. So if you're kind of an Azure guy and that's where you're at and that's all you care about, you know what? AI is going to transform Azure. There is no doubt about it. But for people like me who have been kind of sitting in the corner in the dark, for many years now, all of a sudden there's something exciting happening on the client. And I like something truly exciting, right? I can't, off the top of my head, what was the last thing that was anything even close to this? Longhorn? It's been a long time. And Longhorn worked out great, so there's no reason to think this isn't going to work out great.
Isn't there kind of
this is the thing this is the reason I think this AI stuff is so exciting, because it's something that can energize basically all of Microsoft. This will impact the entire company.
But specifically because of the consumer client side, like Microsoft's not great with consumers in general. I mean, one would argue the last time they've really pushed anything for consumers, it was the Surface devices.
Yeah, you're right. Or maybe, I guess maybe Windows Phone, I guess, maybe, but yes, those are basically
that also, had its set of problems. I mean,
yeah,
Microsoft is all in on the cloud, has been in for a decade. And this is a product that needs cloud. So it sells into the modern mission very, very well. But I appreciate, that your angle is it's the consumer client that is the
my angle is it's everything. And that includes the consumer client, right? So, back in the day, Microsoft used to have this message when on-prem server and Windows were a thing, it was better together, right? This notion that, Windows is great by itself, whatever version we're talking, XP, whatever. But if you put it out there with server, it's even better, And this kind of speaks to that. It's this virtuous cycle where it can kind of float all the boats at Microsoft. So the last time Microsoft made what I would call an all-out effort on consumers was 20 years ago. This is back in the age of Windows Media Mattered and Plays for Sure and Media Center and all of that. So there was a huge push to reach consumers.
Remember Home Server too. I mean, that's all in that.
Home Server was absolutely, yep, of course. Yep. And yeah, for sure. And then Zune and, you can kind of follow the downward trajectory on this thing. But this is cool to me because it's going to, and by the way, as fun as that stuff might have been at the time, as fun as anything entertainment related is. I mean, honestly, I care a lot more about productivity. I care about kind of the grunt work of what a PC is all about. And I just feel like this has gotten short thrift in recent years. That the stuff we've been talking about since Windows 11 has come out, for example, is all about little rounded corners and surface level kind of nonsense. What does an icon look like? And oh my God, they're scrolling out with the search pill again. And it's like, okay, it's interesting on some level, but this is not what I would call deep computer science, And
does the consumer want that?
Well, yeah, I think they do. And I think this speaks to the thing that got normal people excited about computers in the first place. Like there were always people like us, all three of us, who were technical and adopted computers at a very early age because we had this vision of something we could do with these things. I, as a child walking around Sears, saw a Commodore 64 and imagined creating video games. I had this very specific idea of this thing that I could possibly do with this machine. I was really excited by that. But then I have these friends who I consider normal people, right? They're into things like sports and, they're just normal people. And I have very distinct memories of the times when those people came to me and said, I'm going to get a computer, where something had happened that made computers valuable to them. Right. And, for me, it was in 1980. For them, it was in 1999 or 2005 even, or whatever year. And I feel like this is going to enhance those people's lives in the same way that internet access did or whatever those capabilities might be. Meaning you can open up something like PowerPoint or Word or Excel and not be an expert in those things and have it help you create something meaningful and good, which I know a lot of people are super afraid of. And it's right to question all this stuff. But I think we talked about this, the basic capabilities you get in whatever that PowerPoint designer or whatever is. Like, I'm not very good at designing PowerPoints. I have this message. I have to deliver a presentation. I don't do this a lot. Like, how do I make something that people will want to look at that's interesting? I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not good with words or whatever it might be.
If you stuck the ChatGPT interface over top of that, so that literal verbal expression was the thing, and now it fires up the right apps and so forth.
That's right.
Like this what I love about this is just in this past few months when both Google and Amazon have said, this voice thing's a waste of time.
I know.
It's cost us a fortune. It's done nothing. Right. And here's Microsoft saying, the rebirth of Cortana. I hope they don't use the name, but what if every Windows device?
I'm fascinated that you just said that because I literally was working on an editorial about. Actually, let me just look it up about voice assistants and how they were going to be in fact, this is probably not what I probably wouldn't have gone with this, but I called it at the time a diminished voice. And the idea was that voice assistants, smart assistants, whatever you want to call those things, would be the next platform, the next wave, like Microsoft said. Yeah. And how that didn't happen and how one of the things that came out of this past year that's causing all these layoffs is Google and Amazon, the two big players in this market, two biggest players, basically are cutting a lot of the resources to those parts of the company because those things have just siphoned billions of dollars away.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, they're like Washington Post or New York Times or someone wrote an article about what do people actually use these devices for, they Echoes or whatever. And they use them for like playing a certain kind of playlist, or they want to play a little stupid game, or they, maybe it's an older person. They'd like just to have interactions. They talk about what's the weather, it's not, when Microsoft started adding Cortana to Windows, it was like, guys, what are you doing? No one is going to sit down. Not literally no one, because there are people who have accessibility needs and so forth around that, of course. But I mean, most people are just more efficient, mouse, keyboard, touch, whatever, to go from A to B. It just didn't. It's like this is.
This strikes me more as a discoverability solution. This is tooltips on steroids. Instead of hovering your mouse to try and figure out what to click on, the fact that you can, using very conversational interfaces, say, "I'm trying to do X," and have that tool say, "Well, here's what I've got to help you do X."
I bet everyone listening to the show or watching it has at some point, and I will tell you, this has happened to me probably 1,000 times or more. Set up a Windows computer of some kind. Well, it would be Windows 10 or Windows 11. This happens with the Mac too. And it takes a long time. So you leave it, you go do something else in the house. And then all of a sudden you hear something talking somewhere else in the house. Hi, it looks like you're trying to set up Windows. You can use, it just starts blurring out some, whatever discussion it is about whatever. And it's like, I get it. I get what you're trying to do. This was never going to become the primary way that we interacted with almost anything. There are absolute use cases for it. There are very interesting scenarios around driving a car and you want to, say something, whatever. Again, people with accessibility, older people, whatever it might be. But as far as it like being the next wave of computing, I think this last year was the comeuppance for that. It's fascinating. And this is what you just said. And this is why I love this, because this was in my brain. It is absolutely fascinating how this Open AI stuff, DALL-E, ChatGPT, et cetera, just happened right as that happened. Like, it was like, oh, remember we all thought that was the future? That was dumb. And then this other thing happens. You're like, holy crap, this is amazing. And this is a
Newton versus iPhone play, right? This is, you built this thing. It hasn't done what you wanted it to do. You couldn't find a market to it. People are frustrated by it. And now here's another incarnation that on the surface of the base description, it's just a voice interface, seems the same, except that the interaction is so different.
I mean, there are AI voice things that are very interesting. You have a Pixel, I know Richard and I do too, and I know Leo has certainly used them if he's not using one full time. But they have these incredible voice interaction things they can do with holding a call, or say, hey, the lines, or navigating through a menu. You normally have to type numbers and stuff like that. Stuff, that stuff is that an extension of like a Google Assistant kind of feature, or is this in fact an early version of what is really an AI type of situation, which Google, Amazon, Microsoft are just right there in place to make that kind of stuff happen?
And I'm just, again, for the record, I hate the AI term because it's always associated with Hal and trying to kill everybody. These are better, these are better conversational engines for interfacing with a machine. We have a discovery problem in these systems. They have too many capabilities. You go look at what you get for M365 for home. What do I do with all this stuff? And the funny thing is, we talked about this earlier, how Bill Gates wanted one app because he was trying to address that problem too. That it's like people don't know where to go. But what if you simply started with, what would you like to do? Well, I need to make a presentation for work.
Are you saying, Richard, where would you like to go today? Is that what you just said?
Yeah. I thought it was Microsoft Mom. Where do you think you're going today?
Yeah, exactly. It's a slightly different tone in that one.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the naysayer, but I'm starting to think maybe are we over excited about what ChatGPT can do? And
I don't think so.
We've been through a few AI winters in the past where we've been over excited about AI, going back to the 70s.
No, I know,
60s.
I know. I feel like it's really come together, and I think just from the perspective of us, certainly me and Richard and the show and everything, this is an interesting thing for Microsoft because they are the second biggest company in the world by market cap. They are just not thought of in the same breath as these other companies. For some reason, even Facebook or Meta and Google and Amazon and Apple, whatever, even though Microsoft is bigger than all but one of those companies. And this is an interesting return to form. As Microsoft became less dominant overall, although a much bigger company, right? You used to have to kind of rationalize it and say, guys, listen, yeah, we understand that as a percentage of all personal computing, Windows is only 30% or 25% or whatever the number is. It's not 90% anymore. That sounds bad, but it makes more money now than it ever did. Microsoft is a bigger company than it ever was. And, Microsoft is a more important company than it ever was or whatever. But you see in this shift now that there's a chance that Microsoft could emerge on the other side of this as a much more overtly powerful company, that if they get this right, we can just start abusing everyone again. I can't wait. I'm so excited to finally have the dictatorship back. That's all I'm saying. Can we just start abusing the monopoly
your point
power
about the
that we're going to have?
That's how much of that 70% that's not Windows work? Like how much the 30% Windows work may be the productive work, because the other 70% is doom scrolling and social media manipulation, sharing inappropriate information with advertisers. Yeah. So what if the useful work in computing was that stuff, and you do it with Windows?
I assume, because all those people who've been defending Apple and Google over the past several years, I want you to understand that when Microsoft institutes a 30% fee on all ChatGPT transactions, you got exactly what you were asking for. So, but is it still sound fair?
I would also argue, like, the intent of Open AI, this whole idea of, this was formed because a lot of these ML models were being developed in secret. So now we're going to have an open thing.
Right.
Has been radically changed, and I'm resisting saying it has been perverted. This is not what we talked about.
Really? You think not? I mean, at least it's happening in the open, isn't it?
I think the more
not so much.
This is going to be like the App Store, right? You have this idea of a platform, whatever it is, in this case, an iPhone or whatever, and people are going to start making apps for it. You're like, cool. And there's going to be fart apps and stupid stuff. But ultimately, when this platform succeeds, the way it succeeds is by people coming up with things that you didn't anticipate. The desktop publishing that saved the original Macintosh.
Paul, that's what we're afraid of.
Well, no, but that's I know it is what we're afraid of. No, we definitely should discuss that part of it. But it's that potential. You've already seen what it can do in limited ways. It's going to be fascinating to unleash this on the world. And
I don't want to be scaremongering or anything. And I don't think AGI is just around the corner at all.
No, not at all. Not even.
And I have said a couple of times on our shows that we are at an inflection point, that this might be the Cambrian explosion of AI and all that. But I also think maybe it's easy to get overhyped on this stuff. And just like we did with self-driving cars, where we really thought that was going to be the next big thing. And it's turned out harder to do than we thought.
Well, and arguably this has already gone through harder to do.
Yeah.
Right. One would argue the trough of disillusionment is shown in the form of the Google device and the Amazon device. Yeah. There's your trough of disillusionment. And coming out of that is this different model.
Right. They lost so much money.
Well, they didn't lose it. They know where it is. They spent it on things that didn't make them any money.
They know. I love that. Right. They didn't lose it. They know exactly where it is.
It's like, I didn't lose my girlfriend. I know where she is.
Yeah. I just know she's not with me. So this is, again, to bring it back to kind of Microsoft terminology, a lot of talk about the next wave. I think this has a much bigger chance of being the next wave for Microsoft specifically than was the case for anything that you might have thrown in that bucket, whether it's AR, MR, HoloLens, voice assistants, whatever. Those things to me were always kind of add-ons to the platforms that we already had. This one, AI will make the existing platforms better. AI is not the platform in many ways, but it will become the basis of so many things, and it will enhance the existing platforms we're already using, whether it's phone or PC or whatever. And we'll see. We'll see where it ends up.
What'll be unusual if this is true is it means, well, on one hand, Microsoft which tends to go second on a lot of stuff, will have succeeded because they backed off on Cortana, and here they are back with a potential voice interface again. But also that they'll have picked right. They got on board with OpenAI ahead of everyone else, and now they may be holding the linchpin on this. And that's unusual for Microsoft. They're remarkably good at building an assembled B team, right? And that they pack it, that's the M365 model. It doesn't have to be number one, but it's in the box.
This was always the promise of Microsoft Research, that these guys were going to come up with the next big thing. Like it was going to come out of that group or whatever. This is, the story on this will be written someday. I mean, how this all came about, who was the visionary that saw that this was the future, that kind of thing. Well, I guess we'll see.
I think it was a hedged bet. I think they've got enough money to buy into a lot of things. You only remember the wins. You keep forgetting the fails.
Also, we live in a world that is overly fixated on baubles, the Apple iPhones, the whatevers, and when you look at a company like Apple, who has had success in a certain way, and I mean, has been the most successful company ever invented doing a certain thing. And you look at the types of things they invest in that we know about. AR, MR headsets, self-driving cars, they're things, because that's where their brain is. Like, that's how they think. That's in many ways kind of a limitation of their success. It's, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? Microsoft, who has seen great success in the cloud, they're not the number one player, by far, of course, we know that, but they've made a successful transition to the cloud. I think Windows is kind of a weird outlier when it comes to the cloud, where, Office was able to transition to the cloud. Xbox presumably will be able to transition to the cloud. Windows, it's like it's a little tougher. They didn't really fit in, but that's the business. Whatever, they've been successful at it. It's so back end. We talked about this. It's plumbing. It's infrastructure. It's not very exciting.
At the same time, Amazon has a limitation. They don't have endpoint devices. Nobody's excited about a Fire tablet. So, they
right, especially those people who've used one, the poor bastards. Yes, for sure. So all these companies are kind of positioning themselves as they will, based on their experience, et cetera, et cetera. But it's interesting to me that Microsoft, which has made this transition to the cloud, which to me is not very exciting, not very interesting, is now entering this new era where that had to be the first step to get them to where they are today. Sure. Without that happening, this AI stuff is happening somewhere else.
I like the balancing act. Apple has the shiny bauble on the front end, has a heck of a time with the back end. Amazon has the number one back end, no useful front ends. Google, okay.
I know.
Google Theory has ingredients. Their cloud's only Android devices are off in their own place.
Are you judging it by success or actual technology?
Or then how do you measure success? Like, what's the market share?
Well, yeah, but that's okay. So that's what I'm asking. That's reasonable to say success-wise. Amazon's completely dominant. Whether they have the best technology, I don't know. But they're,
yeah, because best is very subjective.
It's the most used technology. I mean, that says something.
Does the market does have some, yeah.
Yeah, but you don't see a lot of people complaining about AWS, right? I think just to be fair, right?
Well, I'm not saying Corey Quinn's complains about it every day.
I mean, I would defend. I don't look. You guys are experts. I'm not, but I would say that Azure probably has equally good technology to AWS.
Yes. Nobody's taking this humble nonsense of yours. You are an expert.
I'm not an expert in network technologies. I'll defer to. No, I don't defer to you, Paul, but I do defer to Richard.
All right. Listen, I'm ready to take the third chair in this one. I'm just saying, the best product doesn't always win.
No, that's right. I mean, McDonald's does not have the best beef in America.
Right.
However, they've sold billions. So
okay,
but that's why I was asking the question, and that's fine if you say, well, what we're judging it on is success. That's completely legit. I mean, that may be the only way.
Well, but I think the technical capabilities are there too. I'm not an expert, but I mean, I know that Amazon or AWS is revved continually. They add new services just like Microsoft does. It's the go-to service for most.
Yeah, and again, I'm not technical, and we run on AWS, by the way, but. My general impression somehow is that Microsoft is cleaner, better implemented. AWS was kind of built grew like Topsy, and was built upon this, and this, and then Azure was built a little bit more from scratch. But that's completely my impression.
Actually, Richard will probably, he'll at least appreciate where I'm coming from. I think he will agree, but we will see. Amazon is AWS is one of those classic products that was made because the company needed it. And then they said, hey, we might be able to sell this thing. It's it's an interesting approach. Microsoft is a platforms company, right?
Yeah.
It's very telling to me that they said in this AI thing, or Satya Nadella said when discussing it, we will make this into platforms, not a platform, but platforms, right? And Microsoft is still a platforms company. I feel like Azure, which in the beginning was Windows Azure, didn't come out of a place where Microsoft said, we need this, maybe other people will use it. It was more like, we're a platforms company. Let's make a platform, and we will license this to other customers who will use it and do whatever they do with it. And does that mean that the resulting products are completely different or whatever? But I don't know. But I feel like they just came out of different places, and that Microsoft's strength, Microsoft's true being or whatever, is as a platform company.
I mean, in PDC 2008, when Ray Ozzie announced Windows Azure, he presented it as, we have all these gigantic platforms, right, that are our internal assets, the MSN site, the Microsoft site, the Xbox site, so forth. They all run on completely separate hardware, and this is dumb. We should be able to consolidate it on common infrastructure. Now, I mean, he said those words. I just don't know that we believed him.
Right. Well, because this was so alien to what we had at the time.
Yeah. And then what Abhishek and his crew made at that time, the web roll, app roll, in a lot of ways was describing serverless in 2009 and 2010 when nobody wanted it, because what was AWS selling? Amazon is a warehousing company. They sold virtual machines, right? At the lowest price possible.
I wish Ozzie had stuck around at Microsoft a little longer in some ways, but I feel like it's just because, I feel like what he wrote, his kind of papers, his big thinking subjects would be very prescient if read today. I think if we went back and looked at them today, like you said, with that one example, I think if we go back and looked at what he said and wrote at the time, I bet he foresaw the world that we lived in today.
I don't disagree. And I think they were trying to build it, and they were well ahead of the market. When Scott Guthrie took over Azure, I mean, what was the first three things they released was virtual machines, what now is called app servers, which is basically IaaS in the cloud, right? I mean, and all of the sort of ingredients for devs and IT folks to move workloads.
Right. There you go. Yep. Yeah. So, okay. I mean, Microsoft, I think because of this worldview, Microsoft is in a good place to become the platform maker that others use to create AI-based solutions of whatever stripe, and so, again, I do, there's absolutely a discussion to be had around the pros and cons and dangers and not dangers of this, but,
we have a slippery slope issue, but I only look at two companies as catering effectively to developers. Microsoft by far number one, and I'm totally biased. They bought me this house ultimately. I built a lot of software on the Microsoft stack.
Let's explain. They did not actually buy him the house.
They didn't actually buy the house.
There was no black bag of cash.
No. Many years ago, somebody told me, if you listen to what Bill Gates says and do some of the things that he's doing, they will put money in money will appear in your pocket. Like good things will happen for you.
Yep.
Would you say that's still true there, Richard? If you were young, just starting out today, would you say follow Microsoft?
Yeah, absolutely. But I would tackle it from a different perspective of, look at the technologies that have the largest opportunities. I do those talks, right? I am going into colleges and universities and high schools and things like, what is the opportunity space? And there's a lot of choice there.
What do you think?
About this, though? This is Microsoft as infrastructure, right? In other words, people are choosing technology stacks of whatever kinds. The things that I care about, which are so pointless, like, is there ever going to be another native Windows, API thing? No, that world has moved on, right? But where Microsoft is important is on the back end. It was like the car discussion we had. Microsoft is going to be all over these automated vehicles. You'll never see a Microsoft logo anywhere, but they're going to be on the back end powering all those experiences that you have on these crazy screens that span the whole dashboard and, whatever front end stuff you're doing. It's just like they're on the back end or can be on the back end of whatever solution you're creating, whatever it might be in whatever market. So even though you might be running an iPhone app, And you think of it as like these guys wrote this thing probably in Swift and used Xcode and blah, blah, blah. But they're using some backend services. And a lot of times that stuff's on Azure.
Yeah. And can be, should be. When students always want to make games, I point them at Unity. It's half of games.
That's right. That's smart. Yeah.
And everything's available to them. If you're talking about getting education, getting successful in technology right now, it's data analytics.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because the shortage is titanic. Yeah. The work only needs so much information. It's a great area to grow.
Learn pandas and Python and do data. Yeah.
There's huge opportunities there.
Yeah. Am I crazy? I would tell them follow open source. Maybe I'm crazy.
No, it depends on what you're talking about.
I honestly feel like that's in the long run, that's the future we're headed towards. Is non-proprietary.
I agree with that. But
and that's essentially happened, right?
I'm bringing this. This is very interesting to me. So when you bring up Visual Studio Installer, you're like, I want to install the workloads, right? I kind of look at the bottom of the list, right? I'm looking at things like MAUI, .NET desktop development, Universal Windows Platform development, that kind of stuff. But you know what's at the top is two Microsoft things, ASP.NET and web development, and then Azure development. Okay. But the other two are Python development, which you guys just brought up, and Node.js, right? Which is the most popular, probably JavaScript runtime, non-web runtime, right? So those are not Microsoft technologies, but they're still top of mind for people using Microsoft tools to create whatever software services they create.
Remember, with the exception of C#, Microsoft does not vend programming languages. They implement tools against other programming languages.
TypeScript? F#?
Well, TypeScript's not a language. TypeScript's really just a...
TypeScript's a language.
Front end
it's a front end, but...
It's a front end for JavaScript.
Okay.
F# would fall into the list, I would say.
It's if you ask Don Syme, the guy who led it, it's a .NETified version of OCaml. But
that's fair.
It's a derivative that then had to be commercialized.
That's fair. But there's plenty of languages that are derivatives of others.
I don't disagree.
And Clojure is just a front end for Java and JavaScript, but I would still call it a language.
The world we live in today, right? Everything was written in C in the beginning and through today. And now you have things like, we're adding Rust everywhere on the back end, right? Very exciting.
Yeah.
And then the front end is mostly JavaScript.
It's exciting unless you've written Rust, and then you realize it's less exciting.
I just looked into Rust over the past week or two, and I think Rust is pretty cool.
Who likes Rust Java programmers because they're already
Mark Rasinovich too.
Yeah, well, no, and Rust is great. I'm not knocking
would say
it.
People who are
kind of
this is the next thing for people who are doing C.
Yeah.
God help
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I hate to deprecate C++. Now I deprecated it in my life.
To do it.
I would never. I've tried and I can't, and I was a C programmer, but there's a lot of production code in C++, and it's still very effective and efficient. And is it a terrible?
Until it's gone from
is
the
it a
world.
terrible language? Is it a bad?
No,
it's a terrible language.
Well, it's also evolved, right? It has a sync and a wait and so forth. Like people don't play with pointers anymore. That language is not static. And it's still the majority of developers at Microsoft are C++ developers.
It's based on this 1990s view of OOP, which was the great white hope of the 1990s or whatever, the next big paradigm, and was kind of shown to be really top heavy. And
I think so, and I think you're in this camp. A lot of people judge C++ by earlier versions. I think modern C++ is probably a lot better than version 11.
It's necessary.
Really? All right.
Yeah.
I'm not writing it. I'm not, but I'm.
Well,
I'm not an expert, but
syntactically, something like Java or C# is better, or whatever that means. But those are managed languages, essentially. Like they require runtimes. They don't target native code, etc.
But they're designed for teams, also, right? This is. That's the other thing.
That's more of a tooling problem. It's just
Well, and the tooling's there for C++ because of its age, if nothing else.
Well, and depending on whose tool stack you use, and this is where Microsoft's original business and sort of at their essence,
Visual Studio, baby.
We build great.
I feel
tools.
like there's got to be way more C in the world than C++. There has to be.
Well, just for legacy reasons.
I wouldn't disagree.
There might even be more Fortran than C++.
It's not just legacy. It's more like
COBOL. It's been around for a long time.
You're writing drivers or kernels or that kind of stuff. Like this is like the deep level
Right.
That's the language.
And really, the people who are running to Rust are people running from C++.
Right. That's what I mean. I think that's the role Rust. We're not going to replace the body of C work that's out there with Rust, but we are going to start adding to it, and we're adding to it with Rust and not with C. By and large, or
if you look at the TileB polls or the Stack Overflow polls, C++ is almost always still close to the top, not maybe number one, but
well, I would also argue how many people normally say I'm using C++ and they're actually writing in C. There is only one.
Right.
Right.
You know, when you're in Visual Studio and you're working in the C components, you can do either.
It's C++. Yeah,
but that's a good point. Yeah. Well, I'm no expert.
You keep saying that, but
I'm a big Lisp fan.
You spend a lot of time programming.
I spend almost all my free time these days programming.
So
but not for any purpose.
Quite a bit of experience with this.
It's like doing crossword puzzles for me.
Don't downplay that. You're very well versed on this.
Yeah, in a kind of a retro way. Funny. I'm like that 8-bit guy.
We are not a programming podcast. You are. You're right there.
I'm really late have been doing a lot of catching up on algorithms and stuff like that, comp sci stuff, nice. Which I never studied. You know, I was a Chinese.
It's major. A year of you do like a year of design patterns in various languages.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating.
Yeah,
and I actually algorithms I find really. It's more for me. It's just it's a game.
Yeah,
it's
mental. It's mental. No, this is your version of a crossword puzzle.
I have no idea what a real programmer in production deals with or any of that. Except reading anecdotally from people who are moaning and groaning. And I wrote a lot of Pascal. Some of Danielle's saying mentioning Pascal in the early days with Apple. That was the language.
Apple Pascal. Yep, that was one of my.
Wrote a lot of Pascal.
I had Apple Pascal and a 2GS in the late 1980s for sure. Yep.
I don't know how we got off on this tangent. It's my favorite subject. Maybe it's my fault.
Well, we're talking about AI. So in other words, all these people who are today using whatever they're using, JavaScript or C or C++ or Rust or whatever, well, probably not Rust, but I think this is, we had this generation of, you know what it is? It's like I talked about desktop publishing. We started getting these ransom note looking documents, right? Or a VB happened.
We've
Visual
discovered
Basic
fonts.
Right. Before Visual Basic went to .NET, anyone could create a Visual Basic application, and God did it show. That kind of thing. And so there's going to be, the App Store.
All of that VBA living behind Excel spreadsheets is still out there.
It's
still haunting
never
you.
Gone away. Yep, never gone away. No, in fact, to this day, I don't know what the version number is on VB right now, but it's got to be 19 something. It's up there. It's like people thought VB stopped at version 6. Oh, no. VB script happened, VBA kept going, and then VB.NET happened, and this thing has been revved. It's still around. It's crazy. But anyway, after VB, I would say the next big thing like that was the App Store, right? And the App Store is fascinating because unlike desktop publishing and VB, those tools are hard, right? And that shows you how impressive that thing was as a platform, that despite the difficulty, so many people jumped on board that. And there are so many mom and pop apps in the App Store now, just made by individuals who learned online or bought a book or went to a boot camp or whatever it is. So I feel like AI has the strong possibility of being the next of those things, right? That it's transformative because it's not just going to be professional developers or whatever that tackle this. It's so exciting, it's going to attract normals.
Well, and even today with ChatGPT in its current form, which is a temporary form, you can take a chunk of VBA code, paste it in, and say, what does this do?
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing.
Now, I'm not saying it's right. It does take a guess.
Right. Turn this into something that doesn't suck.
That's a tough
spit out C# version of it or whatever.
Yeah, I mentioned Steve Gibson asked people to write a tool to look at their LastPass vaults to understand how much of your stuff was done EBC or CBC and what your iterations, your PBKDF2 iterations were and stuff. And the one that he ended up picking was written in PowerShell by ChatGPT.
Nice. Which really means it was written by somebody else in ChatGPT.
But and it used forms to do the GUI and all that stuff. But I mean, I think it did it did enough of a good job that it got a framework to start with, and then of course it had to be polished. But I think that's really interesting.
Richard probably knows a lot more about this stuff. I was looking into a way to, I use a specific set of commands to do some Git stuff, in a command line. I was like, obviously I could write a script to automate this in one whack. And I did that. And I was like, this is sort of convenient, but it'd be kind of cool if I could just write like a simple little application and click a button and have a go. And I was like, I looked into that and you can do that. But actually there's a world of services online that do that for you. And it's like an online form creator. You tell it what you want to do. You kind of go through it and it spits out what is basically a little exe, which is just a front end to PowerShell. And that stuff is like the 1.0 version of what we're talking, of this chat or Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever.
And you're back to what this front end really is a finder for all of those tools, right? Arguably the talent you end up with when you work in GitHub space is the ability to search for libraries, to use the right phrases, to find what's already been written. I would grant you Copilot is that. I mean, you even see copyright and stuff. Yeah. But ChatGPT is a little more generative, it feels like. It's not exactly copying.
It's so important because, and again, there's a weird history at Microsoft where it's a developer organization. They make platforms. They got into the enterprise through first small businesses and what do they call them? Work groups, and got up to the enterprise. Well, now they approach a lot of administrative stuff as if they were programming tools. I mean, PowerShell itself is it's a .NET programming language and runtime essentially for administrators. And it's, I would have made the argument 20 years ago, I don't know that there's a lot of crossover between these two audiences, and I feel like there's always going to be that programming angle, which is Copilot for programmers. And then there's going to be this other thing where it's just normal people, let's say administrators who aren't necessarily good at programming, but they know they need something to automate something. They're not going to write the PowerShell themselves, but they can speak it or type it and have something generate it, and they can make sure it works. And that is very exciting. I think bringing that power to people who wouldn't be able to code it, who are not programmers, right? Not just not capable of coding it, but just are never going to be programmers, is part of the reason this is so exciting.
Well, and now this is where the architecture of Microsoft as a company comes into play, because as that interface gets put on top of Windows, every product team will need to implement it, or nobody will use their product, because it becomes the discoverability interface.
This is the .netification of Windows, but it's the .aiification of Windows, right? Or I shouldn't say of Windows, of Microsoft. In other words, the plan for .NET was that it was going to infuse everything Microsoft did. That didn't work out. But I feel like AI has the chance to be that thing. If your product or service at Microsoft isn't somehow wrapped around or infused by AI, you're
going to have a problem. And if you're not in that generative interface, you're not going to be one of the choices. The problem is there'll be too many choices. Right, you're going to say, "Hey, I need to do X." It is well. Here's a Python implementation, and here's a PowerShell.
No, it's going to be Power Automate. It's going to be in Visual Studio. It's going to be in Office.
Would you like me to write that as a VBA script inside of Excel for you? It can do all of those things. Doesn't make it good, just that it can.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, we're going to be dealing with that. There's no doubt about it. So we'll see how it kind of ekes out over time. I mean, they kind of said, they already announced the Open AI stuff and ChatGPT as an API.
They're on the path. I mean,
did they ever confirm the $10 billion? That was just the rumor, right?
No, they did not confirm that.
They said $1 billion. No, but that was the original investment.
Yeah, they were in.
Supposedly, there's been another $2 billion that's been quiet that no one they've not confirmed that. And supposedly, they've gone and said we want $10 billion. Oh, and we want to own 49% of the company when we're done. And they have not confirmed that either. So those are rumors. It's not like rumors from Bob up the street. I want to say this came out of Bloomberg or something. It was.
I think you're right.
Pretty accurate, publications.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's clear Microsoft is all in on this. Do you think this violates, though, the original conception of open development? Richard, is that what you were kind of saying?
Well, I mean, OpenAI was supposed to be open for everything, and then when GPT-3 came along and it's like, hey, this can be used for quite nefarious purposes. So we're not going to publish the code on it. We are going to provide an API to it so that we can effectively gatekeep what you do with it. And everybody seemed on board with that because what they were saying was true. Once you have something with that good of a natural language interface, you can do some very horrible things. and you're still seeing that model follow. But the fact that the money matters, and then now talking about maybe a public offering and valuations and so forth, we're in an interesting place. Like, what is this thing exactly? But I think Microsoft and all of us clearly perceiving it as a competitive advantage for Microsoft, and that makes it straight up capitalistic. There's no altruism here, folks.
It also, well, this is something that's come up a lot on this show too, is this notion of Microsoft as a steward of some technology, like we talked about, like Minecraft or whatever, or GitHub is a good example. If you look at big tech today and you say, well, which of these companies would you trust with this?
Yes.
I'm not saying any of them are completely trustworthy, but I mean, honestly, not just because of the type of company they are, but just the type of company, I guess they are. Yes, actually, it is because of the type of company. I don't mean like they're a platforms company, as we said. That's one way that they're a type of company, but they're also, I think, a more, again, it breaks down so quickly, but they're a more ethical company than their competitors. And I know the bar is super low. I mean, don't misinterpret what I just said to mean
when the leak about GitHub being acquired happened, like it was on the Friday, the announcement was supposed to be on Monday. Then, as I remember, if I remember correctly, it was the choices were it's going to be acquired, it's going to be Microsoft, or it's going to be Google, or it's going to be Tencent. Which one do you want?
Dude, right? I'm glad Tencent didn't get it. That would be the end of it.
So that's like the devil. Yeah.
And by the end of the weekend, everybody's kind of like, not a bad place for it to be.
No, it's
got Microsoft.
It turned out to be even better than
I was going to say. Right, the follow to that is actually Microsoft was the best steward for GitHub. Like this has worked out incredibly well, and I think that's the way we need to approach this as well. I mean, again, it's none of this is necessarily ideal. But if we had,
and part of this is Microsoft went through you have been declared a pernicious monopoly, and negotiated their way to a consent decree, and spent 10 years in that purgatory dealing with it. And that ended in 2011.
And I don't get the feeling that Nadella is paying lip service to this.
No. I
don't think
he was cancer under his predecessor.
That was his predecessor.
Open source is embraced today. It's a different company.
Yeah. And I think Ballmer realized that was the right direction to go in, and that he was an impediment to going there. And so getting out of the way was the right thing to do.
Right. Yep. I'm glad you said that, because people don't give him credit for a lot of the things. I would say a lot of the things that happened under.
If Satya Nadella's big rollout was build of 2014, and that's .NET is being open sourced and all of these great things. It's like he didn't get all that done.
It's not like he invented that. Yeah, exactly. No. Exactly. Office on the iPhone was not something he invented, but it's the only Richard Nixon could have gone to China. Whatever. Yeah. It's kind of like that, I guess. Kind of very vaguely.
But,
that's a good. Actually, that's a really apt way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the direction was apparent, and they committed to it, including changing leadership to commit to it.
Because I think otherwise it wouldn't have been taken seriously, right? I
think it was a good play.
Yeah, I do too.
And here we are.
It's absolutely the case. And of course, you're close observers, so this is just from the outside looking in, that Microsoft is a different company than it was under Ballmer. And I think a much kinder, you don't think of embracing golf anymore. You don't.
No.
I think of, I always compare them to Germany. World War II happened. That was terrible. It's a different place now. And it's not fair to hold that country to what happened in the 1930s and 1940s in the same way that it's not fair to hold the Microsoft of today to what they did in the 1990s, because it's not the same company. It just is not. Yeah. It has the same name. I get that. A lot of the same products. I get that too. It's a completely different company.
I would also say the company, it's 220,000 people. 210,000 people.
211. Right.
And so it's not uniform. There are big chunks of the company that are the kinder, gentler deck giant that's pro open source and all those things. And there are pieces that are not, or that are struggling to live in the current conditions. Not everybody got the memo, and some of them burnt it. So they're still trying to figure out.
That's true of Germany too, by the way. But
absolutely.
But yes,
are there any big leaders still around from the Ballmer days? Are there any hangovers?
Actually, the biggest. Well, yes. Brad Smith is still around.
Amy Hood.
Brad Smith is maybe the best example, the longest.
Yeah.
But he was the one who was hired literally to solve their antitrust problems and did. Mm-hmm. So that's very interesting.
And arguably, that's Ballmer got CEO as that. As the pernicious monopoly had been declared, right? His first job was to get that consent decree, and
Bill Gates was like, "I'm out.
I'm good. I'm going to Africa for 3 months. See ya."
Yep. I sat in a chair for 18 hours. I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah.
But again, that change was because he was the leader when this thing has happened. He's not the best person to clean it up. So he steps aside and lets his...
from a product perspective, like high level leadership, I would say it is telling that a lot of the guys who were left from previous regimes, so to speak, were kind of at the cloud level or came out of server, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting. Panos Panay is interesting to me because he's the single last leftover from Sinofsky era. Mm-hmm. He was busy making mice and keyboards until he convinced Sinofsky, who convinced Ballmer to make computers. And he runs Windows now, right, as well as Surface. So it's fascinating to me that guy is on the senior leadership team. But, I'm just trying to think about, honestly, a lot of Microsoft senior leadership is newish, I guess I would say.
Newer. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Windows,
I can tell when we've exhausted a subject, and I think we've done that. Windows 11. You'll never run out of Windows 11 news.
Yeah. Is that true? I don't know.
I don't know.
Jeez, I got the wrong damn.
His head's going up and down on this thing. I love it. Do that some more. That's really good. So on the Notion, it shows where Paul's cursor is, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's Richard.
What happens? Yeah, because I clicked on it. It's the wrong link because that was a mistake.
Follow the bouncing ball.
Yeah. So since the last show, there have been 2 builds released to the Windows Insider program. Late last week, probably Thursday, they released a new build to the dev channel. And this brings some changes to Task Manager specifically for developers, right? This ability to do like a live kernel dump from Task Manager, which is kind of a fascinating, complicated, or high-end, I don't know, what do you call it? Low-end, what am I looking for here? This is a developer-oriented feature. It's not something normal people will ever need. And then some nonsense around the accounts page with quota and OneDrive, who cares? So nothing super, super exciting. Today, or yesterday, they released a new build to the release preview channel. We don't actually see a lot of release preview builds these days because we're not on the cusp of another release, although that stuff has gotten kind of, weird. The interesting thing here, and this is actually something that will benefit all people, is let's say you, and I do this all the time, you bring up a new computer or you reset an existing computer and you're on Windows 11 22H2. So what you have to do is go to Windows Update, you install a bunch of updates, and that will include the latest cumulative update for just for the system itself, which is like I said, it's a cumulative update. So it includes everything between then and 22H2. There's going to be a .NET update. There's going to be a bunch of other updates. And they're actually going to roll these things into a single update so that you can get it all at one time, reboot once, and then be completely up to date. So no matter when you install Windows or bring up a new computer, you will have one set of updates to do, and that's it. And there you go. That's great. That's actually really, that's good. That's the way it should always be. So yeah, I think this was kind of the vision, for Windows 10, but certainly for Windows 11. And I think this change will make it a reality. So that's good.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see them pushing against features that we wish we had in 10. This is how we ultimately get everyone over to 11. It's that's right. It's not the new interface it's going to get me to move. It's this longer list of features. Yeah.
Well, moving from 7 to 8, moving from 8 to 10, and now moving from 10 to 11. That's been the case for a while. They've significantly improved that process at every step. Let us not forget the Baton Death March that was installing updates on a Windows 7 SP1 system. If you started that thing now, You'd still be doing it when we recorded next week's show. It's just
did Mr. Sinofsky ban an SP2? That was the whole thing. Was you didn't get an SP2? Now it's just an endless stream of hotfixes.
Well, but they did do. I don't remember what they called it, but they did do a. They had to do something. It was SP2. It was like I think they just called it a cumulative update because the problem in Windows 7 was those updates were all granular. There were no cumulative updates. So you had to install. You got this list. It was 167 things. Whatever, you'd check them all off. Most of them would install. You'd reboot. You'd get more. You come back. Oh, there's more again, and then it just never ended. It was horrible.
Yeah, and you just stop keeping track of it. It's just like just keep turn on auto reboot.
Going. Just go until it's done. And
go
keep
until
checking
it stops,
until it's done.
please.
Yeah, exactly. And then you retire because you're done. It just took a long time. So I think Windows 8 probably was the first big step to solving that problem. And then obviously it got better again in 10 and 11. The other thing is last week we talked about PC sales, and at the time we only had data from IDC. Now we have Gartner as well. And every year for 10 years plus, I don't remember, I write a report where I combine the data and I look at it. I make my own chart and everything, like an analyst. And the PC market is in a horrific state of free fall right now. I don't know how else to say it. And the problem is year over year, it doesn't sound too bad. You're like, PC sales in 2022 fell 16%. And you're like, oh, come on, that's great. Like I thought it was going to be way worse than that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. So if you actually break it down by quarter, it was 6% in the first quarter, minus 6%, minus 14% in the second quarter, minus 17% in the third quarter, and then the holiday quarter, minus 28.3%.
Normally should be the best quarter.
Exactly. So it's not over. The point of that is we've not concluded.
Now,
so
are you proposing that first quarter of 2023 is going to be bigger than minus 28?
Yeah.
Because that seems unlikely.
Well, you got to understand it's kind of it's a weak comparable. So, well, I guess we'll see. So I would say,
because I would also not argue that 2021 was the anomaly. Right? Like this is all pandemic effects. And if you go pre-pandemic, we're still above pre-pandemic levels.
No, that's, by the way, that is true. That's absolutely true. And the thing you want to look at is you want to think about is what is this curve going to look like? Are we going to go back to pre-pandemic? Is it going to actually get worse than that? We don't know that. We don't know. So
yeah, we're really going to go below 250 million units. I mean, that seems to be the magic number. When off the peak of 2010, 2011, you sort of flattened out at around 250, and it stayed like that for a while.
2021, it was like a magical return to. It was 344 million computers were sold that year. Like that's
but
insane.
it's also it's a delusion. Right? Like
it is a delusion, but you have to go back to 2012 to find a year where PC sales were that strong.
Oh, right? Sure. But all the more reason to recognize that's the outlier, not getting back down under 300.
Yep. Yeah. So we'll see. There's no way to predict, right? There's no way to predict. But
to me, it felt like in the 20 teens, we were at 250 because that was replacement rate.
Yep. So like in other words, that's the natural floor or the natural, plus or minus some percentage. It's going to, that's where
you have minor amounts of growth. You have a natural turnover rate. That's 4-year, 5-year machine turns. That's where you level off.
Yeah. So when you have rapid growth like we had in 2021, that is known to be temporary and will be reversed. It follows that you will probably have rapid decline briefly as well, and maybe that's what we're experiencing. Yeah. So, anyway, that's where that sits. So that's whatever. That's where the PC market is. I'm going to be very interested to see how things go this year. Every quarter. And Microsoft, by the way, is releasing their earnings next week. I think on Tuesday. Which is why they announced the layoffs this week. I think it was Dina Bass
and a write down on hardware, and like they shuffle all the bad news out because
it's all that is right. The also I should say the 1.2 is that the right number? The 1.2 billion I think it was in associated costs with this with the layoffs and the write downs is going to be applied to the quarter that they're reporting next week. Right. The fourth calendar quarter, the second fiscal quarter for Microsoft. We'll see. We'll see what that looks like, right? I mean, they're going to take a hit, so that's going to be kind of interesting.
But you're you're still talking about, it's a 1.2. Okay, it's a few percentage points, but it's single digits. The company makes $20 billion a quarter, right? Net.
I think Dina Bass said revenues were going to be down something like 6%, which is also single digits, not bad. But also the worst since, I don't know what that was, maybe 2017, as a drop off, not the worst number, but the worst decline.
It's like, oh no, we are not immune to economic realities either.
Right.
While sitting on our giant stacks of money from running a big chunk of civilization.
Olympus. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
And we give you 6%.
Yep. Yeah, and actually, I would, Microsoft and other companies too, Apple, whoever, as they announce their earnings, what you were going to look for too is talk about the future. Like one of the things that stopped last year was companies stopped predicting what the future quarters were going to look like because it was too volatile.
Sure, they're good this year. This year they can say we don't know.
That's going to be interesting. Year. So if Microsoft kind of comes in, even if it's down a little bit, if they say, look, we expect this is what it's going to look like. That's actually a big improvement from last year, right? So
sure. The pandemic was the ultimate excuse. But in theory, they should be able to estimate economic downturns. Even though inflation numbers seem to be coming down and so forth. I'm glad I don't have that job.
A plague is like the Spanish Inquisition.
Oh, nobody
expects it.
As long as you know Monty Python jokes.
Given the euphoria of the pandemic, which is a weird thing to say, for these companies, someone in the CFO type area should have been saying, hey guys, there's going to be a backside to this, right? I mean, I feel like these companies should have been able to predict to some degree, maybe not.
Well, maybe they did. How do you know they didn't? I mean,
I don't. Okay. Well,
certainly
if they thought it and didn't say it, then they didn't.
Well, who would you mean they should have told you?
Yeah, they should have told.
I certainly had
as a publicly owned company. Yeah, I think that would be something shareholders.
That's actually a good question. Yeah,
I don't mean they'd have to tell me. I feel like
internally they were putting lots of pressure on their staff, right? This past fiscal at Microsoft, their budgets have been very odd by anyone I've ever talked to. Clearly they've been tight with the purse strings internally.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if they weren't talking about it in their quarterly report.
They knew.
I mean, not saying something that it could be a material.
No, it's material. No, that's exactly.
I'm with you.
So.
Well, it also was sort of bundled up in the whole pandemic thing too. Of we're being careful about how we work with our people. We don't want to put them in danger.
I don't know how the finances work at companies. I don't know how my finances work. So why would I know? But but it seems like It does seem to me that maybe one of the prudent things that companies like Microsoft or Google or Apple or Amazon could have done is said, hey, this has been an unprecedented year. We're going to defer some revenues here. We're going to even this out. We're just going to do the right thing because we know that when there's an upside like this, there's going to be a downside. Like no one ever talked like that. I don't even know if, by the way, what I just described is possible or legal. I'm just saying,
or illegal.
I really don't know. But it's interesting to me that you just ride the waves, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down.
And you be sort of forthright on the whole, it's an unusual time and we're not sure. And that's,
right. Or and if there were some way to just kind of stretch this out, I feel like that would have been greeted with, who knows? Maybe
I pay attention to Apple's statements in their quarterly reports, and they very much said headwinds. We're gonna. This is. They warned people like crazy.
Interesting.
So I don't.
Pessimism pays off. It seems, right.
Well, and you have an obligation. I mean, I know these companies have they go to the right to the edge.
Yeah. I was going to say some people would use that term to describe my career.
The best thing about pessimism is you're usually right and occasionally pleasantly surprised.
You're very rarely disappointed. Yeah, no, that's true.
It's the Dvorak principle, and I completely agree with it.
I mean, in the sense that I want to make myself sound better, I would call it realism. But I see what you're saying.
Pessimists always think they're realistic.
Yeah,
you know the old joke. The pessimist thinks the glass is empty. The optimist thinks the glass is half full, and the engineer says the glass was just poorly designed.
Yes. Well, and the surrealist says a fish.
I literally had this. So Leo's heard this many times. I'm sorry for boring you with this, but Richard perhaps has not. One time, my wife said to me, your glass is really half empty, isn't it? And I said, half empty. I said, there's a crack in the bottom of the glass that I just saw, and I'm waiting for the internal bleeding to start. What are you talking? Half empty. I wish it was half empty.
All right, let's talk about this 6 gigahertz CPU. Because Intel, I really thought Intel hit a wall with 5.
Around 4?
Yeah, 4, really, technically. But they got to close to 5. Wasn't the Itanium going to be faster?
Sure.
And then it was so hot that they really... So
how long ago was it? Remember when Apple wanted the PowerPC to hit 1 gigahertz?
Yeah.
And it couldn't.
Right.
And that's what caused them to switch to Intel. We live in an era, though, of performance per watt, don't we?
Yeah.
I mean, it is fascinating that the value that Intel can still add is to just throttle this thing and make it go.
What's the TPU on a 6 gigahertz?
Right. I think it's 150.
It's like,
I think
you could heat the
I
house.
don't have
is what you're saying.
When you first of all, you need the same plug that you use for your dryer or a Tesla.
You need 241.
When you boot up your computer, it's like that scene in Christmas Vacation where all the lights in the town go on down and then the nuclear power comes up.
I remember Tom's Hardware demonstrated getting a processor to 5 gigahertz by cooling it with liquid nitrogen.
Yeah, remember those days?
2003 or 2004 with the P4s.
So this thing is 24 cores, 8 performance, 16 efficiency. Wow.
So this is the 13th gen desktop class chip. So they announced the original.
Oh, the TDP is the TDP is 150 watts.
It is 150.
That's a base. That's the base TDP.
Yeah. This is a core, right, exactly. Core i9, right? Like you said, 24 cores. 6 gigahertz without overclocking, and it can be overclocked, by the way.
Wow.
I think it must be a KS series.
It is
processor,
okay.
So.
That means it's overclockable.
Yep.
Man,
there you go. Crazy.
Unlocked. Intel Core unlocked. This is a 13th gen. Yeah. Wow. Well, obviously they're doing that. Clearly they're doing that because in response to what Apple and ARM and Qualcomm are doing. Right. It's like, okay, well, throw some power at it. We can beat the pants off of you.
Yeah, but the thing is, like an M2 Ultra, just from a die size, right, has got to be like comparing a Volkswagen Bug to a
they're very different
Cadillac.
Beasts.
From the 1970s,
but also unified memory. There's a whole. It's a big system on a chip. It's a whole different animal.
Yep.
Well, the point being, I wasn't being held up by my CPU in the first place.
Yeah. So there.
Right. That's not the CPU for the most part. Smokes cigarettes and plays poker, waiting for memory and network to catch up.
Right.
That's right.
But they can do it, and that's good. Did they say what the process is? Is it 11 nanometer process?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. No, it's got to. It could be 11 actually. I mean, how small could it be? At 7 at the most.
I don't think Intel's doing anything less than 10, are they?
Yeah, I was going to say it's desktop class, so it's going to be bigger.
Well, have to be desktop. You'd have 5 minutes of battery life on a laptop.
Exactly. I'm just going to plug this into the plane.
But, there's bragging rights there. 6 gigahertz. Wow.
I know. It's crazy.
It's Raptor Lake. So that is 10. Raptor Lake is 10
nanometer. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So this will be the only system that's capable of displaying a Windows 11 context menu in real time. So, and once
he
again,
spent hours on that one.
Windows is ahead of the hardware. I'm just saying, So, I mean, some days
look how responsive my search pill is.
Yeah,
it's like you right click and you're like 1, 2. There it is.
It's the list price is $699, which seems to me not that expensive.
I was gonna say that's not that bad for what it is, right?
Because you could easily spend $1,000 on a Xenon.
I think this is
right.
Yeah, this is right. This is kind of a workstation class thing, I would think. I know it's not a Xenon, but it seems like this is a Xenon. Xenon.
Yeah. Xenon would be a noble glass.
Xenon was also the code name for the first Xbox, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, that's right. Project Xenon. Yeah.
Yeah, Xenon. Sorry.
This is cool.
I think this is literally about bragging rights.
It is. It is.
That's all it is. Yeah.
It is. And Apple, it's going to be easier because Apple gained so much going to the M1, but they're not. Now it's going to be very much incremental. We've already seen it with the M2.
Which we saw, by the way. So one of my annoyances with this Apple video, it wasn't really an event, I guess, was they compared the speed of every one of the chips they announced to its predecessor. Oh, and also to the last generation Intel that we used, which, by the way, was like 3 or 4 years ago in some cases. Like it's like, yeah, of course it's double digits.
There's a reason for that, though. They were still selling Intel Mac Minis. They were still selling Intel iMacs.
Well, but they had it. They were, but they also had M1 versions of these things. This stuff is, they're no longer selling that stuff. So I think the idea is, well, this is why we're not going to sell it. But if you look but to your point, when you look at the performance advantage of each of those chips over its direct predecessor, it was maybe low double digit.
Yeah, it's like 20, 12%. Maybe not even.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I mean, so we're starting to see that kind of curve even out, which makes sense. This thing's,
and to Richard's point, doesn't matter because most of the time I haven't felt like any laptop I've used in the last 5 years has been slow.
CPU bound.
Well, except when you right click on the desktop. But yeah, I mean, for the most part,
you almost always know it's software though when things like that happen. It's like
you can feel when UI revving. You can actually hear it. It's like a little wind sound. Here it comes, and then it comes up. You're like, oh, look,
like a Volkswagen
beautiful
bug engine.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Strains for 72 miles an hour.
We're not going up a hill, are we? What's going on here?
Yeah. AMD's doing some cool stuff too.
Yeah,
let's give them credit, and they're doing some very low power chips, high battery life chips. So this is good. The competition is all good.
Yeah. All good.
Well, they can, within the area they can compete in, which is large numbers.
That's the thing. That actually is kind of my point. Like this is where Intel can innovate right now. It's sort of like with the 8th gen. Remember, they went from dual core to quad core on the U series. So it was like this is where we can provide, value add. We don't have that super efficient power per watt thing that Apple's talking about. It's going to be a while. We're working on that. But we can do this. Oh, you want like a 12-cylinder engine? Oh yeah, we can do that. That's their big block. That's kind of where they're at still. So they'll get there or they'll disappear. Either way, we'll survive.
We live in, I think, great times for computer users.
I do too. Yeah. Computers have never been better. For all the nonsense we can complain about PCs and whatever, I review a lot of computers. Computers today are terrific. Though they really are.
They really are.
They're just terrific.
Yeah. I have parts on order for 2 new scratch-built machines. One for the wife, who's doing a lot of 3D rendering stuff, and one for me. Nice. So I will report over the next few weeks.
Tell us what you decided to buy.
Yeah.
I'm very interested.
970 motherboard, 13900 processors, but not i9s. It's just no excuse, right?
No.
i7s.
Yeah.
Even i7s.
Are a lot, and I'm very much figure out where the peak is. Take a couple of steps back.
There you go.
Paid a lot, big premium for that.
Yeah, because that's where the curve suddenly.
Right. And you're going to have cooling problems and and da-da-da-da-da.
Are you just air cooled? You're not doing a liquid?
No. Well, realizing that most what you think are air coolers, those heat pipes have liquid in them. They are using phase change to cool.
Right.
I did water cooling back in the day when it was a stupid thing to do, but it was quiet, right? Like that.
That's the advantage. You don't have those big fans.
Yeah, we did liquid cooling. Exactly. Mark and I built a gaming PC several years ago. We did liquid cooling.
I have my gaming machine is a Alienware Aurora with liquid cooling, and it still sounds like a jet taking off.
Yeah.
Because you still have fans on the radiator.
When it first turns on, right? The initial power on is like a light dim moment.
But you know what?
For sure.
It doesn't matter. I just turn the game up. I'm happy.
Yeah.
I don't care.
I got big external radiators so I could stay passively
and big fans too, right? If you get the big,
I didn't need fans because they were large enough that they radiated.
Wow, nice.
When we first started the show a million years ago, I was working on finalizing what
it wasn't a million. It was an hour and a half ago. Come on,
17 years ago.
The beginning of that. Yes.
I was finalizing the book that became Windows Vista Secrets, and I was co-writing this with Brian Livingston, who was a curious guy. But he used to have his computers were behind a wall, and he had those cutouts in the wall that you would have for like home theater equipment, and he would string the wires for his keyboard and mice and stuff through that because he didn't want to listen to how loud the computers were.
We have a server rack, secondhand server rack. A friend gave me.
It was like an alcove.
That's
just for
got
computers.
soundproofing in it, so you could put the thing in the server rack, have it in your sound studio. Sure. I was really tempted on that Twitter auction, just to bring it back to my favorite subject. They were selling booths for phone calls, soundproof booths, and they had a soundproof conference room.
Sort of like a WeWork thing where you can sit, like not a room, but like a booth.
No, they're tiny little booths.
Yeah,
and I was thinking that'd be great for podcasting. I put a little sound booth in my office.
It would be easy to soundproof it for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's designed for that. It's ventilated and everything. I didn't buy it, but
Carl Franklin has 3 of them, I think.
Really?
His studio.
Why 3?
Why?
Well, because we were back in the day, we were making a lot of podcasts, and they were multi-person. Yeah. So there was a standalone booth, and there was a paired booth, so you could see each other. But
you don't want to be breathing on each other.
That's pretty serious. That's serious podcaster.
They worked. Wow. They were good. Yeah, they're oddly dead. Like you're slightly. It's a little too quiet in those rooms.
It's weird. Yeah. I actually like a little bit of ambient.
Yeah,
not too much.
I don't want to amplify my tinnitus.
Yeah.
I don't need that
story entirely. Yes.
Yeah.
Apple is rumored to be adding touch screens. Are you going to take a little victory lap now?
No, I don't understand what they do. No, not really.
And it's, by the way, not even if it's true, which it might not be, till 2025.
Right? So
he's
I'd
accurate.
say pretty accurate.
But when you say Apple's going to do something 2 years from now, they could very well just say, well, never mind. We thought about it.
Well, they apparently just canceled all their AR headset plans we've been babbling about for the past 20 months or whatever.
What?
Yeah. They're going to just go with a lower cost VR headset instead.
And they're not going to do AR at all?
At least not right away. They were supposed to they were going to announce
delays.
This in March. This was happening. Anyway, so I don't know how to view this, right? Aside from all the normal Apple nonsense, we'll never do that. It doesn't make sense. 2 eagles don't make it, or 2 turkeys don't make an eagle, or whatever the commentary was. I don't know. We talked about this months ago. I kind of made the point, like one of the things, like I said, I review a lot of laptops. And I got to be honest, like on a traditional laptop form factor, I don't think I want touch. I don't use it. I don't want it.
I have it right here on this ThinkPad. I don't ever use it. It's just out of reach. It's like, our Mac guys said, "Oh no, we want it because occasionally you want to hit OK."
Yes, right? Geez, come on. So. Yeah, here's the thing. Here's one thing so PC makers have actually stopped shipping all multi-touch displays. That used to be a big problem. So now you have choices. That's good. I sometimes there's like a hair on the screen. You want to hit it and you don't want like an application to go flying off the screen or whatever. There's that. There's also just
the old hair on a screen problem, of course. How could we forget? I mean,
just being, whatever it is, dust, whatever.
Is that a dead pixel or some snot? I don't know. But something's on the screen.
I would like it to be a choice. I will say years ago, like when I think about Apple and their platforms and what they're doing, and they force iOS and iPad developers to use Macs to create those apps, it would have been one thing. Advantage of the Windows platform is if you're making touch apps on whatever platform, if you have a touchscreen, you can interact with them very naturally as you create them in the emulator.
Yeah, iPhone apps. That was the big.
That's what I mean. Like,
right?
I feel like that should have been that would have benefited developers. So I feel like it should be an option. But the thing is, like, Tim Cook has been very critical of Microsoft Surface products in particular. It's not as hypocritical as it sounds because he's not really doing the same thing as we're doing on Windows. Like the point of touch on Windows was to make Surface to make a tablet. It's a tablet. You can detach the keyboard and use it as a tablet. What Apple is supposedly going to do is just add touch to laptops, and that's a different animal. It's still a keyboard touchpad first product. Touch would be like the third UI, the third interaction type or whatever. So it's not exactly the same thing. They still have a very distinct product in the iPad, or multiple iPad products. They still have a very distinct Mac. I think, like I said, I think you can make a case for developers, and I guess you want to click OK, whatever. I mean, I guess iPad.
I definitely have a machine like a Surface Pro set up to be used as touch and it's set closer. It's at a different stand.
Okay.
But
Apple's not doing that.
The only time I ever separated my Surface Book into two pieces is to annoy iPad people on a plane. Because you can disconnect it, turn it over the other way, and stand it up tent style to watch on a plane or hang it on the back of a seat.
It's really neat. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and the iPad
Although that connection it can be the source of reliability issues too. I mean, some on the early ones especially, it would kind of rotate out of the, kind of misclick or whatever.
Yeah, if it didn't set right, you've got a problem. If you get a little red icon on that,
you're like, oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Exactly. Yeah. Obviously, Apple has this Catalyst technology that allows developers to bring iPhone and iPad apps to the Mac. And I suppose this will make those interactions more natural and easier because I suspect that the process for making those apps kind of keyboard and touchpad friendly maybe was not as easy as Apple kind of advertised. And if you just support touch, that becomes less of a problem. And maybe more of those apps will come. The Mac becomes more valuable because you have more of those apps you can run. So
it also is a way to get new versions out, right? Because now we have to make them all touch savvy. So
yeah. So we'll see what happens there. But I don't actually. I'm not 100% convinced that adding touch to Windows was like a genius stroke or whatever. It's that right tool for the job thing. I mean, I use
what did you end up using most of the time, right? Like that's the reality.
Certain things are good for certain things. Like the iPad that I have, I use for reading every day. It's great for that. When I travel, I will occasionally watch a video on it. It's good for that.
Yeah. And I never ever hold my Surface Book screen in my hand. It scares me. It just feels fragile.
That's interesting, really, huh?
Yeah. No, it's no good. Yeah. And I feel like a laptop form factor, Mac or PC, whatever. I prefer Windows, but is really good for that kind of work that I do every day, writing essentially, using a keyboard. And then, phone is good for what phone's good. So to me, those are three distinct devices. They make sense. I know, like, cynically, you can be like, of course, Apple wants to sell extra devices. That's all they ever do. They want you to buy an iPad and a Mac. And like, they do. But maybe those devices are different enough that does make sense. He says, knowing that probably millions of people are using iPads with keyboards and touchpads right now. And I don't, there is a weird crossover there, but
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what to think of it.
Cooler heads have prevailed.
That's cooler heads.
I didn't think I'd ever say that about Congress.
Congress?
Yeah, I know. That seems a little odd. Heads? But I think the Army, because of this one guy, just couldn't say no to HoloLens.
I know. And this was a $1.75 trillion government funding.
It was a boondoggle. It was not going to work. Soldiers didn't want it.
Yeah, so the U.S. Congress has rejected the U.S. Army's request to spend an additional $400 million to buy 6,900 new custom HoloLens headsets from Microsoft this year.
I have to think there are some people in the Army going, oh, thank God.
Oh, we didn't talk about this, but so back in the layoff bit, there was some language that there was a Satya Nadella email to employees that was leaked to GeekWire. That I'm just going to read this part of it because it said, among the other things that were going on, they said Microsoft will be divesting in other areas, including taking a $1.2 billion charge in Q2 related to three different things, one of which was changes to our hardware portfolio. And I thought, man, is that about Surface? Is something going on with Surface? I talked to Mary Jo about it. I talked to Richard about it. And actually, it's related to HoloLens.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Very clearly. Right?
Yep. We lost Richard. He's a tiny little Richard.
Tiny little Richard. What happened to Richard? We lost a Richard.
All right. Well, it's just you now, Paul. You and me, buddy.
I knew it would come down to this eventually. So, anyhow, I guess what's going to happen now is that the Army has gone back to Microsoft and said, okay, let's see if we can't do something about a better version of this, and we'll see what happens there. But I feel like this thing has kind of wound its course. Not that we're not going to see Terminator headset, something in the future, but I just never felt right to me.
I wouldn't have wanted to go into battle.
No, you see the picture of the guy wearing the headset, and you're like, I've worn a HoloLens, and I got to tell you, I'm not jumping over fences and firing a rifle. I'm just walking into walls and stuff, and like, it's not very, mission affecting physical impairments. I'm like, I can see that.
Yeah.
Like, I've used an HoloLens. Like, yeah, that makes sense to me. So I just don't, this doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
So look, there's always going to be room for some kind of a heads up display on some kind of a glass.
Yeah, I mean, soldiers use night vision goggles, but there's a specific use purpose for it.
I think there's a gap we need to cross, or there's a gulf between that and these things, which is this giant, thing.
Well, I think the intent was kind of like a heads-up display in combat, which, that information's useful.
That makes sense. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know.
Even playing video games, like if you pretend you're playing Call of Duty, it's fake war, right?
Yeah.
You hear gunfire, and listen, if you're an expert in the field, you may know that that sound that thing made is this particular kind of bullet fired from this kind of machine, and it must be the enemy. And maybe if you're really good at it, but having something that says, "Hey, that thing happening over there, that's the bad guys," like that's absolutely useful. That will never fail us. It will always work great. But, this giant headset, I mean, like the guy, it's like picking off the guy sticking his head up from the ditch. The headset comes up like 2 seconds before the rest. It's like, I think there's a guy over there. He's got a pumpkin on his head. Like it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I don't know. We'll see.
Fascinating.
It never made sense to me.
I do feel like HoloLens got derailed by the U.S. Army. That
I do too. Yeah.
That it was, these contracts were so big. I think it was tied into some of these other ones that it distracted Alice Kipman, who's now no longer involved.
I completely agree. But to be fair to Microsoft, the trick with HoloLens was always like this thing made sense in very specific vertical markets, none of which were going to be the next huge business for Microsoft. And then the U.S. Army comes calling and like, oh my God, here is the biggest vertical market of all. Obviously, we're going to pour all our resources. It was the right thing for Microsoft to do. I guess I think the way I look at it is like, this was not going to work. Like it's just.
No, and it used their research dollars to innovate and hopefully be able to roll that back into your other product. Like if I'm Trimble, the guys who did the hard hat version of the HoloLens and was pushing on this should be on every construction site, I'm pretty upset with Microsoft right now because there hasn't been a new headset
investing in that at all. Yeah. Yep.
Well, and who knows if they are, but apparently HoloLens, I suspect if I'm Trimble, I saw the HoloLens 3 because it was very close to completion and then it went away.
Yeah.
Trimble was one of the demo things they did with the early HoloLens.
The original HoloLens 2 disappeared, and they did do a HoloLens 2. The original HoloLens 3 disappeared, and they may still do one, right? Yeah, and the internal take on this was it just wasn't a big enough leap, I guess.
Yeah.
I will say, I mean, 2 over 1 actually is a big leap. It is a big leap.
Yeah, it was a substantial improvement.
For a long time.
I mean, it's just. Well, we've had 2 TikToks now. Like the hardware has advanced enough now that we should be able to have a large field of view, a longer battery life, and lighter.
Smaller device, all that stuff. Yep. And we just don't have it. And anyway, I agree. 100%. They were definitely distracted by this Army thing.
My concern right now is I can't tell you who's leading the project. And that to me, if there's not somebody at the CVP level who this is one of the things they're hanging on, it's got a tough time getting anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to take a little break. We'll come back. We've got Xbox news, tips, tricks, apps, and whiskey. all
for some reason, that makes a lot of sense to me.
It does. It all goes together in some interesting way. Our show today brought to you by Tanium. We used to call Tanium, talk about Tanium as the emerging disruptors in the security area. I don't think they're emerging anymore, but they're definitely have disrupted. Tanium's approach is so different. The industry's approach to cybersecurity is, Tanium says, fundamentally flawed. Tanium does it different. The way it has been, IT management and security point tools offer a small piece of the solution. You need to protect your environment. Many of them promise they can stop all breaches. They can't. And a lot of the problem comes because you're trying to figure this out with bad data or old data, trying to defend your critical assets from cyber attacks with tools that don't work together, that don't talk to each other. This is no way for IT teams to navigate today's very challenging attack surface. It's time for a different approach, and that's Tanium. Tanium says it's time for a convergence of tools, endpoints, and IT operations and security. They're really positioned very well for this modern world in which we have endpoints all over the place. We've got remote work, hybrid work, everybody's BYOD. Tanium has solutions for government entities, for education, for financial services, retail, and healthcare. You could trust their solutions for every workflow that relies on endpoint data. They've got asset discovery and inventorying that, and you're going to hear a thread here, tracks down every IT asset you own, and here's the common thread, instantaneously. Tanium's fast. You don't wait for old data. You get where you stand right now. They have risk and compliance management that'll help you find and fix vulnerabilities in seconds at scale. Very sophisticated threat hunting technologies. They do it in real time. Again, speed is of the essence. Client management allows you to automate operations from discovery to management. You've got sensitive data monitoring that'll index and monitor global data in seconds. You got to keep track of that sensitive data, and it could do it in seconds like that. Tanium protects organizations where other endpoint management and security providers have failed. With a single platform, Tanium identifies where all your data is across your entire IT estate, patches every device you own in seconds, implements critical security controls all from a single pane of glass. Kevin Bush, who is vice president of IT at Ring Power, says, quote, Tanium brings visibility to one screen for our whole team. And he says, and I think he's speaking from experience here, if you don't have that kind of visibility, you're not going to be able to sleep at night. If you're having trouble sleeping, you need Tanium. With real-time data comes real-time impact. Ready to unite operations and security teams with a single source of truth? Ready to confidently protect your organization from cyber threats? Well, then it's time you met Tanium. To learn more, visit tanium.com/twit, Tanium. Tanium.com/twit. We thank him so much for supporting Windows Weekly with Paulie T and Richie C. And the show goes on with our Xbox segment.
It's more of a Activision Blizzard segment these days, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? What's up?
Well, we found someone other than Sony to complain about Microsoft's Activision Blizzard acquisition. And those two companies are Google and NVIDIA, two other competitors. Although Google has left cloud gaming, which is kind of interesting. And NVIDIA, of course, has their GeForce Now service, which is supposed to be really good these days. So, yeah, they don't want it to happen. So, that's it. I don't really have much more to say about that. Stupid companies that trying to
But this still all seems like posturing, right? I mean, NVIDIA's thing was
all of this.
We want equal and open access to games. Like, if you're going to point at someone for that, point at Sony. Exactly. Are you kidding?
Exactly. Yeah, a couple of shows ago, I had like that chart that kind of showed like how many platform exclusives there were, and Sony was like most of it, and then Nintendo and Microsoft were almost none of it. Yeah, I mean, that's the gaming business. Like, we don't want other people to do what we're doing. Could someone put a stop to this? It's just like this crazy kind of outrage.
You're going to put Microsoft in third place in gaming? Oh my God.
Although as Satya Nadella described it, fourth place. It's like what, I mean, come on. It's crazy. Anyway, actually, the other thing, Richard and I talked about offline, which is this notion that, speaking of posturing, there's also what I would call regulatory posturing occurring here, which is, regulators in the EU, which is the second story, are expected to file complaints about this acquisition, a warning, I guess, statement of objections, the FTC, et cetera. These organizations kind of have to justify their existence, right? They can't just greenlight everything that happens anymore. We're standing up to big tech here, But as we've said so many times, the concessions that Microsoft can make to satisfy all concerns are obvious and have already been put on the table. I think everyone's going to get what they want unless, of course, what you want is, I just don't want Microsoft to have this company, you know?
Yeah.
There's a guy in my comments section who argues against this repeatedly. He keeps saying, I just don't want Microsoft to have even more dominance in the video game industry. It's like, they don't have any. What are you talking about? They're in third place or fourth place. I don't know. I don't know where fourth place comes from, but at least third place. I would call it third place.
But you can't have these organizations looking like they're rubber stamping $1 trillion companies. Like you have to. I remember working with being on the side of selling something to a government entity where literally the acquisition officer says, now you have to give something to me. I'm not saying a bribe. I'm saying I need to be able to say to my boss,
no, we can't. We literally can't call it a bribe, but you are going to give me something. And when it's done, you will have the thing that you want.
Yeah. There has to be a concession of some kind, whatever it means.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys read Foss Patents, which I think is a great website.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, they've done a great job of covering this stuff. And Florian Mueller, has written about other regulators from around the world. So he has some interesting, he really goes through in great detail all of these rulings and kind of makes, what are the points they're trying to make. There have been some kind of lesser regulators, so to speak, like, Brazil and Chile and the UK, which is not really lesser, but who have just come out in support of this, right? The UK is not, I'm sorry, but the Brazil and Chile have. And it's interesting because a lot of what this involves is basically a kind of a public survey. Like, what do the people think of this, And there's been some interesting data that has come out of this. I think it was the UK, which actually will probably issue some form of, will try to block this in some way. 75% of respondents to one of their surveys supported this acquisition. Nice. And that included twice as many PlayStation users as it did Xbox users. There was also, at the FNE, I think it's Chilean, the Chilean regulatory body basically wrote a report on what the FTC complaint was about and said, this in no way dissuades or discourages us from reaching our own conclusion, which is unconditional clearance. Like they were just like, their complaint is nonsense. I thought that was classic.
And everybody takes their cues from the Chileans.
That's the thing, but right. Of course they don't, but I think I don't know if it was Brazil or Chile, but one of the, similar survey, 61% of gamers said that they would simply, if Call of Duty disappeared from the PlayStation, they would stick with PlayStation and just play other games.
Right.
Okay. Only 20% of them said they would cause them to switch consoles.
Yeah, there are other first-person shooter World War II semi-realistic games out there where you still run at 30 miles an hour and can jump long distances.
All right, so I'm going to take great exception to that because no, there are not. And
there's only one.
No, I mean technically, I think there are, but I am not aware of them because there's only one game.
Why would anyone ever want to play?
But I don't play it on PlayStation either, right? So who cares? It works fine on Xbox.
We're all PC master race anyway. If we have any sense,
there you go. Which is probably the best way to play.
I like the idea of making a play to the regulator to say, why don't you put in a regulatory rule about game restrictions that they can only be restricted for 18 months or something like that? Well, let's make Sony cringe and say maybe this deal's okay as it is.
It's like Sony, we're really glad you brought up this issue of exclusivity. Yeah. We actually agree with you 100%. And we therefore decree that you will have to bring all of your games to Xbox. All right. Well, thank you for bringing that up.
Really appreciate it.
Whatever. Stupid. And then this is just semi-related, but I think this is kind of nice. So Google, as everyone knows, canceled Stadia. I believe today is the day. I think today is the day it disappears. But one of their last acts was to enable an update for the Stadia controller that turns it into a normal Bluetooth controller, so you can use it elsewhere. You can use it with your PC on other platforms, whatever. And that's nice. I mean, honestly, the Stadia controller is pretty good. By the way, everyone who bought one got it for free. They give you your money back, and now you have a nice Bluetooth controller you can use anywhere you want. Actually, on mobile as well. So nice. Yeah, that was the right thing to do. I'd like to see that.
Good job, Google.
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
Before we go on, I just want to mention there's about a week and a half left to take our survey. We do like you to do that if you can, just so we get to know you better. It helps us sell advertising on the show and helps us decide what shows to do. If you would just go to twit.tv/survey2030 3 should only take you a few minutes. Completely optional. Any question you don't like, ignore. But it really is helpful for us. And we thank all the people who've done it. It's been great. But we're going to wrap it up at the end of the month. So get on over to twit.tv/survey23. A little public service announcement from your friends at Twit.
Very nice.
And now the back of the book, starting with a tip from Paul Thurrott.
Yeah, I think last week we talked about this new offering, new-ish offering from Microsoft, Microsoft 365 Basic, right? Which is this way to, you don't get the Office apps, right? But you get 100 gigabytes of OneDrive storage. You actually get ad-free inbox, like on Outlook.com. So it's a little different from the previous OneDrive extra storage option. And okay, that's fine. Whatever. They rebranded this thing. They added a feature. Cool. Somebody posted this picture and I went and looked at it, and there is a way to buy more OneDrive storage now. As it turns out, this is not actually brand new. And to me, it was brand new. And the weird thing is I just wrote about this in the Windows 11 field guide, and I actually alluded to this in the book. So I actually knew this wasn't new at the time, but I just kind of zoned on it. But here's how this works. Sorry, I should say, in the past, before this Microsoft 365 Basic subscription existed, the only way you could add OneDrive storage to your Microsoft account was to buy that 100 gig tier, which was $199 a month. That was it. That was the only option. You couldn't stack them. You couldn't add more. You couldn't buy a terabyte, whatever. If you wanted more storage, you had to buy Microsoft 365 Family or Personal, right? And in both cases, you get 1 terabyte of storage per user. Obviously, if you're an individual and you want to buy Family, you get 6 terabyte accounts. You could, there's different ways to tie those things together. You could use one for videos, or one for, however you want to do it. You can do that if you want. But as it turns out, once you do that, you can in fact buy additional storage. You can't just keep stacking them. You can't go and go. But you can, once you have any version of Microsoft 365, a paid version, consumer version, you can buy 200 gigabytes, 400 gigabytes, 600 gigabytes, 800 gigabytes, or 1 terabyte of additional storage. So you can have up to 2 terabytes of storage in total per account. Pricing is okay. It's 200 gigabytes is $1.99 a month. It goes up by $2 for each one. So by the time you get to a terabyte, it's $9.99 a month. There's no way to pay in a year, so you can't save money. So that 1 terabyte is going to cost you $120. That's not fantastic. I don't know this, but I feel like off the top of my head, I think Google, if you have like a Gmail account, you want to buy like 2 terabytes. I think that's probably $120 a year. I think it's probably a better deal. But if you're in the Microsoft space and you thought you were stuck at 1 terabyte, there is this way you can go above that. So it's available. At least it's better than nothing. I kind of wish these things were just available as standalone offerings, if you didn't want Microsoft 365, but had a Microsoft account. But I believe they're not. I think you have to have a Microsoft account first. And to check on that, just go to the OneDrive site on the web, and there'll be like a managed storage button somewhere down on the bottom left, and then you'll see the plans and upgrades in there. So if you have, do I have a way to do this? I don't have a way to do this right now, but I bet if you don't pay for Microsoft 365, that either isn't there or it just, it says there is nothing. But if you do pay for Microsoft 365, you'll see the 5 additional storage options. So that's pretty cool.
Was that also a listener that sent you that, or you just discovered it?
Someone sent me a picture of it on Twitter, and then I was like, "Oh, good! They finally added extra storage options." But then I realized actually this is not new yet.
Yeah.
Not only is it not new, I knew about it because I actually alluded to it in the book.
Can be forgiven for not remembering that.
I wrote about this like 3 months ago. Yeah. It's embarrassing. Like my brain overfloweth.
Yes.
I haven't talked about this in a while, but one of the things I am going to be adding to the book is sections in relevant chapters to kind of workarounds, right? So for example, if you are confounded by the limitations of the Windows 11 start menu or taskbar or desktop, you might consider something like Start 11. So I'm going to start adding those things to the book. One of the things the thing I'm most eager to add to the book, however, is this thing called MS Edge Redirect. And this is a project on GitHub where you run an exe, and it prevents Windows 10 or 11 from using Edge when you specify a different browser as your default browser. So for example, you click on a story in the widgets board, you click on a search result in search highlights or just in search, or any of the other times where the OS says, yeah, we don't really care what you chose, we're going to load Edge, it redirects it and uses your browser. So I've been trying that on a couple of different computers. It works great. I don't actually click on these things a lot. Honestly, I don't use widgets and I don't use search, but I've been testing it because I want to write about it, and it's free, obviously. So I guess the best thing to do, just Google MS Edge Redirect is the name of this. So it's something that's probably going to have to be updated a lot over time, because Microsoft has, in the past at least, I don't know recently, but back when Windows 11 was new about 15 months ago, was actively working to thwart these kind of workarounds.
We talked a lot about it, I remember.
Yeah, we sure did. The other app, the other set of apps I wanted to mention, and this may surprise some people, is because I actually think they're pretty good, is Apple has finally belatedly started to replace iTunes on Windows with 3 new apps. Apple TV, which is for videos, obviously, Apple Music, and Apple Devices. And Apple Devices is that, manage your iPod or your iPhone kind of thing, or you want to use your computer to transfer data back and forth. It's that thing that was built into iTunes that you kind of had to have iTunes. I use Apple TV Plus. I don't use Apple Music, and I would never connect my phone to my computer for this kind of thing, but I did as part of my most recent examination of Windows 11 on ARM on I think it was Lenovo ThinkPad X11S, something like that, X13S. Look at iTunes, which is a steaming pile of garbage. And in fact, it was so bad, I put it on a really fast computer, just Intel computer, just to see, and it's horrible. It's like iTunes today, iTunes 10 years ago is and was one of the worst written applications of all time. It was horrible. Terrible.
Yeah.
These apps are
wasn't even so great on the Mac, to be honest with you.
Okay, that I'm not as familiar with, but iTunes was a piece of garbage. Apple TV, Apple Music, and Apple Devices are in preview for the Windows, on Windows 11 only, I believe. I don't think they're going to Windows 10, which is a little questionable, but at least they're on preview now. You need the exact URLs to get them. You can't just search for them in the store yet. But when you find them, install them. If you use any of those apps or those services, give it that. Honestly, they're really nice. The only weird thing about them, let me bring up, I think I did it on this. Yeah. The only weird thing about it was I have a big music library that I sync to. I don't use Apple Music, but I do use iTunes Match. So I have my CD RIP library is up in the cloud or whatever. And the first time I used this, I brought up my library, you bring up an album, you're like, okay, click the song and play. And it says, oh, you have to authorize this computer before you can, play here. I'm like, yeah, okay, obviously, of course. So you click OK, and then the authorization box goes away and there's no way to authorize. Like, wait, what? So you kind of click around, like, where is this thing? Like, where is, just so you know, it's not in settings. You can't find it that way. In the bottom left of the UI is your profile name, and Paul Thurrott in my case. When you click on that, it will say authorized machine. And there is no indication in the UI where you have to find this thing. Jeez. So I know. But okay, that aside, these apps, they probably look a lot like they do on the Mac, honestly, but they support light and dark mode. They're very, they look like Windows apps, like modern Windows apps, like a UWP or a Windows app, SDK app. Like they look nice, like they're nice.
There's no reason not to. Just hire somebody who writes Windows software. How hard is that?
They probably did exactly that, honestly. Mm-hmm. But I guess the point is, like, I would based on my previous experience with Apple apps and Windows, I would be predisposed to think this would be terrible. And honestly, I don't know what took so long, but
the remnants of Steve Jobs are slowly wafting into
fading away.
Yeah.
The real question is, where does podcasts show up?
They don't, to my knowledge. I don't believe there is a way on Windows to access Apple Podcasts.
There's plenty of ways to do it in Windows.
Is there an Apple Podcast client on Mac? Yeah. There is. Okay.
Yeah. But who cares?
Yeah, so if you're an iPhone...
Nobody listens to podcasts. Goodness knows.
Well, yes. I don't
Fortunately, we do netcasts, so we're all right.
There you go. For the people you love. Or
from people you love. For podcasts you love from people you trust. Yeah.
There it is.
Lisa says, because for a long time, I foolishly, quixotically said we're a netcast. We're not a podcast.
Right.
Couldn't convince anybody. And a couple of years ago, I was at a podcast expo. I finally got convinced. All right, we're to change it all to podcasts. Now Lisa says, I wish it kept it Netcast because it's a lot harder to sell podcasts these days. If we could say, "Oh, we're not a podcast, we're a Netcast." Oh,
Netcast
that's different.
almost wasn't there what was that Netscape communicator feature that was about? Wasn't there a netcasting thing? Or wasn't there a feature?
Oh, maybe thing? I don't remember that. Maybe.
Yeah,
you're thinking of that program that would get
the woman
your
who left
news.
Netscape and started the thing, and it was something cast. What was that called? Do you remember?
Oh, God, it was awful. I remember everybody would come into work at the site back in the mid-'90s and turn on PointCast.
It was a big deal for about 15 minutes, yeah.
PointCast. They turn on their machine, and there'd be no internet access for about 45 minutes while every machine downloaded the latest news because it was pull, and it was terrible.
I'm not sure if that...
Is that not what you're thinking? It might not be.
I don't think it's something, but it's something like this.
There was PointCast. I remember
it was
that.
a person
back
from
in the day.
Netscape who left that company. It was a woman, though, who ran it.
I don't know.
Boy.
Interweb?
No, but
you're just making up words.
It will
now.
come to me when I'm taking a shower or walking.
I know. Hey, I saw a recent study. I think it's wrong. That says the reason you have brilliant thoughts while you shower is because you're doing something so trivial that your mind can wander. So you kind of go on automatic. I don't think that's true because I do trivial things all the time, like wash the dishes, make the bed, and I don't get great thoughts. You never say, "Oh, I got a great making the bed thought," but I think it's the combination.
There's something to this.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's wrong.
This is why I play video games. During the day, I'll play like a 10-minute match, and so I get my mind off the thing I'm writing, and I'm focusing on not really focusing, but I'm mindlessly playing this, and then it's like, oh, that's the word I was looking for. A
completely unscientific theory, which is yes, it's that, plus the steam dilates the capillaries and more blood's getting to your brain. Same reason you do it when you walk, or when you're walking. You do better.
So there is
thinking.
A stimulation, in other words.
Yeah, it's two. There's
definitely
together.
Something to walking outside that is
absolutely
just
because you're zoning out. Your mind is getting to think, but you're also getting some blood going.
You know how you know when you're in the zone is when you're walking and maybe you're listening to like an audiobook or something, and you're like, just turn this thing off. Like I
have to think.
I need to. Yeah. I just want to think.
Focus.
I think this is something we're losing as a generation.
We're constantly. It's weird.
We're constantly stimulated.
I think there's also a frame of referencing. You know how you think, I need to go get that thing, then you walk into the room, and now you can't remember
the context
again.
Switch. Yes.
That when you change rooms,
those things are absolutely related and are in many ways like the opposite, but it's probably the same mechanism. Trigger or something. The same mechanism. Yeah.
Change the frame of reference.
Basically, we have no idea how the brain works.
No.
And we're just making things
But we will
up.
opine on it endlessly.
It is going to be good to have some enterprise picks of the week. And I believe Mr. Richard Campbell's going to do the honors. Hey, everybody. Leo Laporte here. I am the founder and one of the hosts at the Twit Podcast Network. I want to talk to you a little bit about what we do here at Twit because I think it's unique. And I think for anybody who is bringing a product or a service to a tech audience, you need to know about what we do here at Twit. We've built an amazing audience of engaged, intelligent, affluent listeners who listen to us and trust us when we recommend a product. Our mission statement as Twit is to build a highly engaged community of tech enthusiasts. Boy, already your ears should be perking up at that because highly engaged is good for you. Tech enthusiasts, if that's who you're looking for, this is the place. We do it by offering them the knowledge they need to understand and use technology in today's world. And I hear from our audience all the time, part of that knowledge comes from our advertisers. We are very careful. We pick advertisers with great products, great services, with integrity, and introduce them to our audience with authenticity and genuine enthusiasm. And that makes our host-read ads different from anything else you can buy. We are literally bringing you to the attention of our audience and giving you a big, fat endorsement. We like to create partnerships with trusted brands who are in it for the long run, long-term partners that want to grow with us. And we have so many great success stories. Tim Broom, who founded IT Pro TV in 2013, started advertising with us on day one, has been with us ever since. He said, quote, "We would not be where we are today without the Twit network." I think the proof is in the pudding. Advertisers like IT Pro TV and Audible that have been with us for more than 10 years, they stick around because their ads work. And honestly, isn't that why you're buying advertising? You get a lot with Twit. We have a very full service attitude. We almost think of it as kind of artisanal advertising, boutique advertising. You'll get a full service continuity team. People who are on the phone with you, who are in touch with you, who support you with everything from copywriting to graphic design. So you are not alone in this. We embed our ads into the shows. They're not added later. They're part of the shows. In fact, often they're such a part of our shows that our other hosts will chime in on the ad saying, yeah, I love that. Or just the other day, one of our hosts said, man, I really got to buy that. That's an additional benefit to you because you're hearing people our audience trusts saying, yeah, that sounds great. We always over-deliver on impressions, so you know you're going to get the impressions you expect. The ads are unique every time. We don't pre-record them and roll them in. We are genuinely doing those ads in the middle of the show. We'll give you great onboarding services. Ad tech with pod sites, that's free for direct clients. Gives you a lot of reporting, gives you a great idea of how well your ads are working. You'll get courtesy commercials. You actually can take our ads and share them across social media and landing pages. That really extends the reach. There are other free goodies too, including mentions in our weekly newsletter that's sent to thousands of fans, engaged fans who really want to see this stuff. We give you bonus ads and social media promotion too. So if you want to be a long-term partner, introduce your product to a savvy, engaged tech audience. Visit twit.tv/advertise. Check out those testimonials. Mark McCrary was the CEO of Authentic. You probably know him, one of the biggest original podcast advertising companies. We've been with him for 16 years. Mark said the feedback from many advertisers over 16 years across a range of product categories, everything from razors to computers, is that if ads and podcasts are going to work for a brand, they're going to work on Twitch shows. I'm very proud of what we do because it's honest, it's got integrity, it's authentic, and it really is a great introduction to our audience of your brand. Our listeners are smart, they're engaged, they're tech savvy, they're dedicated to our network, and that's one of the reasons we only work with high integrity partners that we've personally and thoroughly vetted. I have absolute approval on everybody. If you've got a great product, I want to hear from you. Elevate your brand by reaching out today at advertise@twit.tv. Break out of the advertising norm. Grow your brand with host-read ads on twit.tv. Visit twit.tv/advertise for more details, or you can email us advertise@twit.tv if you're ready to launch your campaign now. I can't wait to see your product. So give us a ring.
This week's Run As Radio I did with April Edwards, where we talked a lot about sort of the state of the DevOps practices in organizations. And so Azure DevOps came up as part of that conversation. And I thought it's a great enterprise product. It's useful for a lot of things. It's actually the cloudification version of Team Foundation Server, but greatly expanded into more of the sort of classic set of agile practices, having pin boards.
What is DevOps? You hear this term all the time. What does that mean?
Back in the old days, we used to call them high functioning teams.
Oh,
you know, when you
like a high functioning alcoholic. What do you?
I wouldn't know anything about that, Paul. I don't know what you're talking about. But it was sort of the reality of, are we all pulling in the same direction? You know, you often get into these silos in organizations where the developers are hurling code over the wall for the ops guys to deploy and so forth. And this is Jez Humble and a bunch of other great folks that started this DevOps movement where they said, hey, let's all work more closely together, because actually our goal is to provide customer value. And as long as we can focus on the overall customer value, all of that gets better.
I always got the sensation that it was also had something to do with automation.
Well,
you write code. I don't know. That's what I'm asking. So I don't know.
And so this is where the tooling piece comes into it. Right. So there's sort of this idea of, culture and process, and then ultimately tooling. So the fact that we will get together and have these meetings and talk about overall value and how we each contribute.
Yeah.
And Azure DevOps is ultimately a set of tools for facilitating that. And the big one from the developer perspective is this the CI/CD pipeline, this idea that when I check in code, an automated process kicks off that now runs all the tests and does the build and pushes it into a position where it can be taken over by QA or even as far as rolled into production.
So CI/CD is related in a way, and
continuous integration, continuous delivery is a portion of the Azure DevOps suite.
Right.
But I've also seen the tooling in Azure DevOps used for just project management.
Yeah.
Or just, here are a set of tasks, here are the different people working on them, here are our current blockers, like that. All of that mechanism works the same. So, and I bring it up more than anything because often organizations own it already. It's part of a package they've bought, whether through the volume license agreement or through their Azure agreements. They're just not using it. They don't know they have it. They're like, oh, well, that's for people making SaaS software. It's like, well, SaaS folks definitely use it, but so do many others. So, I mean, it's a powerful set of tools, one way or the other. It's often driven by existing organizations who moved off the on-prem source control systems and CI/CD pipelines, they're custom-built ones, to go use the cloud because it's cheaper and somewhat easier to use, a little more reliable. And it has all the pieces in place. You're no longer fighting setting stuff up and configuring it and all of those issues. Not that any of it's easy to set up. Like all of these things take effort. And there are many different sets of solutions here. What's appealing about Azure DevOps in the enterprise level is that you already own it. It's all of the pieces. So you're doing a lot less roll your own, and it's easier to hire people that already understand those bits and can pull the pieces together and can get people involved. The biggest thing that I think April and I talked about over the course of 40 minutes or so was making sure everyone's involved. There's a place for business stakeholders, certainly a place for security in this. Like everyone has a contribution to make to that customer value that's important. And so making sure the tooling is inclusive as well makes you all the more successful with it.
I'm a big one for tooling. That's why I use Emacs. But that's a story for another day. It's also why I want to know more about whiskey.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Would you describe Emacs as an IDE?
No. It has IDE-like components. If you're using a language like the language of my choice, Lisp, Emacs is the only way really to do it right because it's just so integrated beautifully.
I just wanted to see where you were on the IDE spectrum.
It's not an IDE. Well, I have auto completion, so that's one.
Yeah.
I can hover over a function and see the other function. There's lots of hover over capabilities. So it's very similar. You have project-based capabilities, so you can open a project. You have if you stay on a keyword, it will give you a definition of the keyword if you've set up your Emacs to do that. Yeah. And there's things like that. So mostly it's that you have two frames open.
New computer and you had Emacs. Is there a way to automate the bringing in of everything?
Yeah, I have my Emacs. So all my Emacs files are stored on GitHub. So I just clone that repository and my Emacs is set up. It's very quick to set up. And then because
I like that you use GitHub as OneDrive. That's good.
Well, it's good because I can commit from different machines if I update it and stuff. So it's kind of similar to having a code base.
I like having all that automation around there because then in the comments I can say this machine configured by a tool.
Yeah. And I'm the tool. I get it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then
I wasn't talking about you, Leo. That's what it says on my machine about me.
Because Lisp development is very interactive because you have a REPL going all the time, and Lisp is unique. And this is the best thing about it. If you have a bug in your code, it drops into the debugger. You can modify the code while it's still running, and then finish the execution, or you can develop in this interactive way that is remarkable. It's really great.
Yeah, very powerful. And it's certainly something they do in .NET for exactly that same reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people have, Lisp, it's interesting because as much as it's mocked, has influenced most modern languages.
Oh, without a doubt.
To one.
It wasn't Lisp's tagline, it was hard to write, so it should be hard to read.
I think you're thinking Perl, but okay.
That's pretty good.
I think actually Lisp code is very clear because it doesn't.
No, right. Lisp's tagline was some brackets are good, so more brackets are better.
Yeah, but they're all the same bracket. You don't have curly braces and square ones.
No square ones.
There's no semicolons. It's a little simpler in that regard. And Emacs does very well with having the two frames open in your REPL in one frame and the other, and I like it. It's just I'm used to it. But what it reminds me of is how important tooling is choosing a language is one thing, but honestly, you've got to think about the tooling available because that makes a huge difference. It really does. Let's talk. I'm excited about this one, although it looks like Glenlivet's page for this is 404.
Yeah, it's a little broken right now, which is unfortunate. But I picked Glenlivet Nadella because it fits in my repertoire of different classes of whiskey that I keep around for different sorts of folks. So
it's a very interesting. Look how light and pale it is. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting.
And it's typically I will pour this for someone who likes whiskey.
That's not a good picture of that, by the way.
No.
Well,
but it is actually a very pale whiskey.
It's pale. Yeah.
But let me tell you the story behind this, because it goes back a fair ways. It actually goes back to the Shackleton expedition of 1907.
What?
So when Shackleton did his explorations of Antarctica, which did not go particularly well, a bunch of the things that he left behind, there was a bunch of stuff he left behind. And in 2006, fast forward 100 years, a group of explorers were inspecting the shack that was still there, been there for 100 years. And they were concerned because there was more ice melt and so forth that was going to damage it. So they were actually underneath it, trying to put in dams to protect the structure to keep it healthy. And while they were under there, they found a case of whiskey. They'd been under there for 100 years.
Wow.
And it was this?
And it was not. Remember, I'm telling a story here, so
okay.
it's gonna be lengthy.
Okay.
And so this whiskey was actually a White and Mackay whiskey that was made specifically for Shackleton at the time. It had a higher alcohol level because he was concerned it was going to freeze, which it did anyway, but that's a separate problem. And it was a full case. It was a dozen bottles, although a couple of them were damaged. A few of them were not. And so there was an auction, and the White and Mackay folks got those bottles, and they pulled some of the whiskey out of it and then recreated it in an edition called Shackleton, oddly enough, for $250 a bottle.
How interesting.
Yeah, it was a great marketing story.
Yeah, because it really isn't the same, obviously.
No, but the funny part is, Glenlivet's like the oldest distillery going. So when you actually look at what the makeup of the Shackleton whiskey was, what it was an old school whiskey, the way whiskey used to be made, which was very normal to be blended. It typically wasn't colored with it didn't get colored with caramel, which is why it was lighter colored. It was typically aged in oak barrels. This is before international trade made it easy to buy barrels from lots of different locations, so it tended to be paler in color. And it also wasn't chill filtered. Now, chill filtration became very hip in the 70s when they were trying to make whiskey popular, because old school whiskeys, when you put ice in them, go cloudy. And that was considered an inferior product. And so chill filtration was an approach where you rapidly chill down the undiluted distillate that's come out of the barrels, and certain particulates freeze and fall to the bottom of the cask.
The things that make it cloudy.
The things that make it cloudy, and now it's clear. And so what Livet did when they saw the hit that was Shackleton, they said, you guys just want an old school whiskey? Geez, we've only been doing that for 200 years. Let's make one again. What Nadella is a Glenlivet without any color treatment and without any chill filtration. And it tastes different. So it's one of the reasons I keep it around for folks.
It's also cask strength, right?
No, it's not, because cask strength is too variable. Right? They want to. People like what Livet figured out why they became one of the most successful whiskey makers very early on was how to make consistent whiskey. How do you make the extraordinary thing about a Macallan 12 is that it tastes like Macallan 12 every year.
So good too.
Like, how do you do that?
Yeah,
and it's incredibly complicated. It's about a lot of different barrels go into making a given edition of Macallan 12.
Yeah, that's actually what here in Napa County, or next door in Napa County, that's what they do to get a consistent wine. Is you have to taste it and blend it until you get it consistent. If you're making it from the same grape, it's going to change year to year every year. Yeah.
It's just the nature of growing, right? That's what natural things look like. So what I enjoy about Nadella for people who like whiskey and are just getting into it in a big way, is I've taken away all of the common things. It doesn't have that robust color you equate with quality. It doesn't. It is not particularly long aged, and it has that lack of chill filtration. Introduces a bunch of flavors that were always there. They're just typically removed. that it's oilier. It's got more texture to it. And so it's not something I'll pour for someone who doesn't know anything about whiskey.
It's a more authentic, you think? Kind of more of
one would argue old school.
Old school.
Is it old school more authentic? It's more of the original flavor.
That's how it used to be.
Yes, Richard, it is.
Well, and for me, the big thing is saying how much, always the question when you're talking about anybody who's becoming an aficionado is how much is brand affecting you? How much is appearance affecting you?
Yeah.
And Nadura is one of the few examples where a bunch of that has been stripped away.
Does Nadura mean, I'm making this up in my head, natural?
I think that's the implication, but I think they just made the word up.
Oh, okay. Because it sounds very Celtic.
Yes.
Yeah. It almost sounds like it could be like an Eskimo name or something like a.
Yeah.
No, apparently it does mean natural in Gaelic, but with
that's what it feels like. It's a
sure
Gaelic
we're mispronouncing
word.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Nadra.
Yeah. It's going to be Scottish. You're going to have to hock a loogie somewhere.
Oh, it's the greatest whiskey ever. It's completely Nadra. I want some now. I can't find it, unfortunately. I think it's one of those that
they're not the least expensive bottle, depending on where you're looking. Last time I bought it in Canada, I think it was $100 Canadian. So that's like
$1 million US.
$1.50 Canadian American.
Okay.
It's a $50, $60 bottle if you can find one.
I see a lot of reviews. I don't see anybody selling it. I just went and looked at KNL, which is our local kind of. It's 16 years old. That's interesting too. Yeah, $100. $100.
Yeah, and remember that the year appellation is always the youngest thing that's in the bottle. That's the rules.
Interesting.
So there's some older blended in to get to a particular flavor profile, but they have to put the youngest that's in the bottle.
I'm gonna have to go down to Visalia to get it. They have $59 in Visalia. I guess Rozzie's Market doesn't know what they've got. This liquor's too clear. We're going to have to sell it cheaper.
Yeah, exactly.
It's less expensive. I'm loving this education. And I'm not even drinking this stuff. I'm just loving learning about it. Especially that Shackleton story. That's so cool.
The Shackleton story is great.
Yeah.
And then there's a modern version of Shackleton now making, which is remarkably unimpressive.
Yeah.
But a lot less expensive.
Yeah. You want unimpressive? I'll give you this whiskey that's made by a San Francisco startup. It's not aged. It's chemically altered to taste like it's been aged. And
that would be worth a taste.
It tastes like rubber. Well, the next time you're here, I'll give you the bottle. You can have it. Amy Webb, our futurist, sent it to me. The future of whiskey. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the future of Windows Weekly, except next week you're going to be in London. Won't be here, right, Richard?
No, I won't be around.
We'll miss you. But we will do the show, of course, as we always do, on a Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern for the East Coasters. That is 1900 UTC. So in London time, it'll be about 7 p.m. You can watch us do it live at live.twit.tv. There's live audio and video at that address. If you're watching live, you can participate live, which is kind of fun. In fact, I've been thinking, Paul, maybe next week when Richard's not here, we can take some calls from and questions from the chat room and from the Discord with the club members to fill in for Richard. They can pitch in with their favorite booze or something. He says, Well, if that's your idea, I guess. No, we'll have some fun with that. irc.twit.tv. That's the place to ask and talk amongst yourselves. Of course, Club Twit members have their own special place, our Discord, which is so much fun. Club Twit is well worth the $7 a month. What do you get? You get, ad-free versions of all of our shows, which I think is pretty special. You get access to the creepy animated GIFs in the Club Twit Discord. And you also get the Twit Plus feed with things like Paul's unique to the club, hands-on Windows, just for the club. Some really good stuff in there. We also have some events coming up. I know, I love the animated GIFs.
I literally just closed Discord, so I didn't have to see that.
I know, I don't blame you. Tomorrow, Lisa and I, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, right about midnight UTC, we'll be talking about Inside Twit. We haven't done one of those in a couple of years, so that should be fun. You can join us, ask questions. Win2 Dow next in a couple of weeks, the host of All About Android. She's a developer, loves her Kotlin. She's a Kotlin developer on Android. And Daniel Suarez, whose new book is just out, Critical Mass, will be doing a triangulation and questions from the club on February 10th. We just got the book in. So club members get access to some special events like that, ad-free versions of all the shows, the Twit Plus feed, $7 a month. We should charge more. We're not gonna, though. twit.tv/club twit if you want to join. We'd sure appreciate that. I just got Daniel's new book. I'm very excited. Critical Mass. Can't wait to talk to him on February 10th.
Guy's had the same person narrating his books, I think, since the very beginning.
He has. He's good, too. Do you like his narrator? I think he's really good.
I do.
Yeah. I think that's kind of important.
Jeff Gerner.
He's just got a great style. Yeah. Remember Demon, the first passages of Demon? And Gerner reading it, and it just explodes?
I would say, like those first maybe 3 books are
incredible.
Just the best.
Yeah.
Freedom. What was Freedom?
Demon, Freedom, TM. And then he did Kill Decision, which was...
Kill Decision.
Yeah. Influx, Change Agent. Delta V, he wrote a couple of years ago, and this is the follow-up to this, and this is about space exploration, which is something he's very excited about, and asteroid, reclamation and stuff. So, great stuff. Thank you, Richard. How long are you going to be in London, you lucky dog?
Just a week.
Just a week.
London for a week, then home for a week, then Stockholm for a week.
Wow. Wow. And you're speaking at conferences? You want to plug these conferences?
At London, it's the NDC London conference. Will be at the Queen Elizabeth II Center.
Nice.
And in Stockholm, we'll be at the conference center in Stockholm, and that is a conference called Svetdag,
which means sweat dog.
Something like that.
Something like that. Richard is the host of Run As Radio, runasradio.com. .net rocks as well. Rich Campbell on the Twitter. And the Mastodon, Paul Thurrott, is thurrott.com. That's his website, his blog. Join and become, as you can see, I'm a premium member. The best stuff there. Well worth joining. And don't forget his Field Guide to Windows 11, which is out now, and includes the Field Guide to Windows 10, so it's downward compatible, as all good Windows products should be.
Sure.
Is at leanpub.com. Choose your own price. leanpub.com. Gentlemen, have a wonderful week. Have fun in London. Richard, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. We'll see you next week on Windows Weekly. Bye-bye.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Ad Astra Magazine, and each week I join with my co-host to bring you This Week in Space, the latest and greatest news from the final frontier. We talk to NASA chiefs, space scientists, engineers, educators, and artists, and sometimes we just shoot the breeze over what's hot and what's not in space, books, and TV. And we do it all for you, our fellow true believers. So whether you're an armchair adventurer or waiting for your turn to grab a slot in Elon's Mars rocket, join us on This Week in Space and be part of the greatest adventure of all time.